because Mick and I are the old guys here, right? Like having to print it out, like MapQuest directions.
I did too. My dad used
like,
to take me to dirtback treks, and I was the navigator.
I'm like, was that the left? Was that the left?
Yeah, you missed it 86 miles ago.
Yeah, I'm on line number 87
set
already.
the odometer. The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt.
What can we say, man? Another year back with Hoyt. We're both shooting RX8s. I'm shooting 70 pounds in the bourbon, which I love bourbon.
That's great.
And you're shooting 80 pounds in the straight black.
Blacked out as always, man. I got the, so I'm shooting the 500 grain Easton Arrow this year. And at 80 pounds, I'm flinging that thing at like 300 feet per second. I mean, it's deadly. Put a water buffalo in front of me and he's done.
I mean, we shot it earlier. You literally put an arrow through a brand new target, like never been shot before.
I know. So one other thing that Hoyt is doing this year is they're making all their own strings in-house. And so the quality is top notch, and it just really is something that is setting them apart from their competitors.
Well, what we always try to do when we go to our bow shop, Ultimate Outdoors, is we try to shoot other bows just to make sure that we are really giving everybody a fair chance.
Sure.
The reality is it's a no-brainer. Hoyt stands above all of them every single time.
Definitely. And so right now you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, for 20% off any apparel on the Hoyt website. And as always,
get serious, get Hoyt. And we're back.
Ew.
Okay, good. HUNTR Podcast.
I had to leave you hanging there for a little bit.
Episode 226 says Nick continues to keep us aligned. Nick is telling us it is December the 12th, a Thursday today.
Thank you for that intel, Nick, that insight.
And
to all of you that are listening, we appreciate you guys being here, whether you're listening on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. Give us a like, follow, or subscribe, whichever is appropriate for the channel. One of those will give you some sort of notification as to when these drop. If you've written us on Instagram, DM, or the website, those are the two that we check most frequently. And I think at this point we're fairly caught up.
Yeah, pretty caught up.
If we missed you, try again. We do
try again.
We do try to get back on those. So, and we have some merch on the website. I know Christmas is coming up, and Black Friday and Cyber Monday, all that stuff is behind us. But Christmas is still to come.
Christmas is coming,
and people still want stuff. So
they do.
You can check that out.
And it's there.
And here we go.
Breaking news. We were talking a little bit earlier. The government is forcing the sale of TikTok effective January 19th or banned in the United States.
Shit.
So if you're listening to this, we've got a little over 5 weeks. If TikTok doesn't sell in those 5 weeks, I think there is like a 90-day one-time delay fee, like time thing in there, but it'll be banned. Damn. Doubtful. It's too valuable, right? Like people are gonna not let TikTok be banned, I would assume.
I feel like if it was that harmful, it would have been by now.
I thought they did. That's what I said. I thought they banned it already.
No,
I mean I know it's still there.
They tried, and then it went to like a federal court, and the court upheld it just recently, and said, "Okay, yep, you guys, we're gonna ban this thing. You have till January 19th, 2025 to sell it." And then there's like I said, there's like 190-day.
So the
clause.
platform itself is not banned, but the ownership of it, right, is what's being disputed, like that, because it's a national security thing.
Well, they'll ban the whole platform if they don't sell the ownership.
Right. So they just force them to sell it, and seems like there's loopholes
all
all over that thing, right?
It's a Japanese ownership.
Chinese.
Yeah.
So another country has to own it.
I think they want somebody in the U.S. to own it.
Okay.
And then follow like our FCC guidelines and stuff like that.
Dude,
that's racist.
I wonder how much TikTok is worth.
A lot.
Like so much money. Like maybe only like Bezos and Gates could afford it, and Elon.
Yeah, I bet it's worth a pile of money.
Yeah, like that. Who could buy it?
I don't know. Probably starts with a B.
Yeah.
Or hundreds of bees.
Hundreds of bees. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would assume it sells.
Billion.
It sells, right? Yeah. Somebody buys it. It's worth too much money.
Yeah.
It's too established.
I assume so. Yeah.
But
why are you interested?
Well, I was talking about buying land.
It's either TikTok or land in Iowa. So.
Both seem valuable at this point. Yeah, no, I'm not interested. But in case you only listen to us on TikTok, which apparently there's 100,000 of you that do that. So
probably the most valuable part of it is like just the audience base that's here. Like, because it could easily be recreated in terms of like the software.
Yeah, I mean,
easily. Yeah, but it's the convert. Like if you were to try to do that to convert everybody over, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean it's the user based.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are you on TikTok, Nick?
I post.
He's like, have you heard of We Are HUNTR?
Yeah.
I
I run that channel, so.
Have you heard of this?
Yeah, my girlfriend will send me like recipes and stuff. That's like about it. I don't like scroll on it, but if my friends or my girlfriend send me stuff, I'll just like.
Were you here earlier when I said the lieutenant governor of Ohio, his press secretary reached out? I asked her, I said, how did you come across our stuff? She's like, TikTok.
No way.
Yeah.
Holy
wild.
shit.
Oh, yeah.
Wild. But yeah, I don't know. I don't do much scrolling on TikTok.
I'm not on there either. I can't handle it. I don't have the app.
I like Instagram.
Yeah.
If I'm going to scroll, it's on Instagram, but I don't know. I try not to scroll.
I always get frustrated when somebody sends
Good for
me a
you.
TikTok and then I open it up and it's like, you download the app. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
Not worth it.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
We have a pretty
good for you. The scrolling is what's time
We have
consuming.
a pretty active audience on it. I did check in on
Yeah.
it recently. We're over 100,000 followers on TikTok.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Had a
Thanks.
couple couple of videos blow up recently on there.
Wow. Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm. There's
Oh.
one that had like 300 some thousand. I don't even remember.
Whoa.
which one it was, but you know, we'll see if it.
We're kind of a big
Yeah.
deal.
Freaking
Huh?
TikTok. I live in such a fantasy world, dude. Like that stuff is just not real to me.
Yeah.
Like even when, like, it's just bizarre. In my mind, I have the ability to like things on the internet they're not real.
Yeah. It is kind of weird. I can't believe it's been so sustainable in terms of like, there's YouTube Shorts
Mm-hmm.
and Instagram Reels, which are arguably, not even arguably, the same exact thing.
Yes.
So
Same
I don't-
thing.
Yeah, I'm
Same.
surprised. I don't know what'll happen.
They've all kind of been the same thing. I remember when Instagram came out, and I was like, compared to Facebook, I was like, this is not an invention. Like this is
Right.
just okay. It's just the picture section. So,
Mhm.
and then when TikTok came out, so I think all it's been is just like a slightly more addictive algorithm as things have gone on, and then creators choose to just wherever eyeballs are,
Yeah.
that's where you're gonna have an audience. So
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
just the evolution.
It's kind of weird too. I mean, pay attention next time you're on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
How many people post pictures now? I mean, obviously people post
Very few,
pictures
right?
of their buck,
Yeah,
if they
it's all
kill one,
videos though.
but it's all videos.
Yeah.
When I was posting our Spotify rap stuff the other day, I was like, this feels weird.
So, yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I mean. Like when Instagram came out after Facebook, they're like, oh, pictures are more engaging. I'm like, duh, they're pictures.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Worth 1,000 words. Everybody knows that. And then when TikTok was like videos, they're like, oh, videos are more
Reels.
engaging than
Yep.
in pictures. I'm like, yeah, duh. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but
Interesting.
I guess I missed out on billions of dollars. Not that I had the ability to develop it, but.
Between that
So what's next? What's after
that and Bitcoin.
videos? What's more engaging than videos?
Virtual reality.
Maybe.
Yeah, like real videos, real life
Like
experiences.
real life experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just people in a box.
AI.
We're hunting people.
Or people.
Huh. Or maybe if we had that foresight, we could
Mhm.
project that.
Colin sent us some hats we have on the table, which are kind of cool.
Are these for sale?
I don't know.
Can people? I don't know if people can buy these, but there's a fun one.
Not a bow.
Not
really,
a bow.
Really freaking great. Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect.
That's funny.
I feel like I just need to wear that around Ohio, like all the time.
Hey,
Mm-hmm. Right here.
there I am.
See that? Yeah, that's me. That's me. Anyways, it is December the 6th when we're recording this. December the 6th. It's a Friday. Kind of off my game. Like, what day
Oh, it is Friday.
It is.
That's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Feels weird today.
Yep. So if it's the 12th, Pennsylvania gun season's still in play. Ohio's over. Illinois is over. A lot of them are over. December muzzleloader seasons, I think, are coming in. All the South is coming in for gun seasons. Yeah, just kind of 2 weeks to Christmas type of thing.
Yeah.
Mindset.
Yep. So just hanging out, getting through them here. We've got a good buddy of ours, Mick Doggett, on the podcast
Mhm.
today.
Old Mick.
It's been a long time coming with Mick. He's been a good friend of ours for 3 years now.
Yeah.
2 years now. We met Mick at ATA a few years
Mhm.
ago.
Mm-hmm.
Probably started off a listener fan, but he does. I'll let him, I guess, state what his involvement with Hoyt, but basically he's been a big part of our relationship over there.
Mhm.
And
Easton, Hoyt. He's got a lot of manufacturers under his belt from a rep side.
Yep, and things very similar to we do in terms of like a year-round season, and he's a big out-of-state guy as well. He's from Texas.
I was
but-
going to say, a rare Southerner on the podcast.
Yeah. So there's that whole thing going on, and which frankly, it's interesting to hear him talk about it because it's like it's so foreign, but like in a lot of ways sounds very similar to like Pennsylvania to me.
I'm like, oh, Texas. So like fences, corn piles, cactus.
Well, on the private land side of it, but he's all public.
Right, which is like, I didn't even know Texas had public land.
And I think Eastern Texas, I could be wrong about
probably.
that. But yeah, he's they've killed some slammers. His buddy, and he together they killed I think 173. He was telling me before.
Wow.
And he just killed like a 167, which in that part of Texas, I mean, those are like 200-inch deer. Those are monsters.
Yeah, that's giants.
I'm told.
So I'm told. Well, why don't we bring Mick in?
Here we go.
What's up, buddy?
What's up, man?
All right, dude. Well, so Texas boy, you're in Texas. I guess maybe just to start, give our audience a little bit of background on kind of, your industry presence, I guess, and that might be a good place for us to tie this all together.
Yeah, I've been able to live the dream for about 22 years. Ran track in college, decided to move home and get married when I was 19, and actually got married when I was 20, but needed to get a job and started working at a True Value hardware store and selling guns and bows and stuff like that, and kind of built a name for myself in that area, and I knew everyone. And then it was kind of the boom of the box stores when the Bass Pros and the Cabela's and all those, they were opening, and stores everywhere. And an investor came to me and they wanted to start a sporting goods store in that town. And they wanted to build up to so many stores and then sell it off was the plan. And I was the guy. I knew everyone. And so I went into that and kind of burned the candle at both ends, met the right people, was a buyer. And out of the blue one day, I get a phone call from a gentleman, and he says, "Hey, would you like to fly to Salt Lake City and interview to sell Hoyt?" And I'm like, I'm not sure, I don't really want to be an outside salesman, but hey, it sounds like an awesome trip. So I fly up there, and one of the things about Hoyt is when you meet those people and you meet some of the giants of the industry that have come from that company, you just fall in love with it. And I never looked back. I actually accepted the job before I knew what it paid. My wife asked me, she said, well, what does it pay? And I said, I don't know. I want to do it. So I was 24 years old, and today I'm 42, and this will be my 18th product line to sell for Hoyt.
Wow. That's awesome, man. Well, it's funny, when you talk about that, like, kind of passion aspect of things. I think a lot of people listen to this and they're like, they always have a passion for this, or they love hunting, and it's like there's a thought process that goes through, I'm sure, everybody's head of like, man, it'd be really cool to work in the industry. And it has its perks, but it also, you're busy in a lot of the time that, you look right now, Hoyt just launched a new bow, and, it's coming out of November into December.
Yep. And, if you've ever sat in a tree stand and, received anywhere from 20 to 50 phone calls a day, it's hard to hunt. It's hard to sit there when guys are waiting on you and they want to talk to you, because that's how we make our money. And you have to be available. So there is a balance there with hunting and launches, because the launches, since in my career, have always been in late October or November.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that's, I know at one point in time there were a lot of launches that were happening more in like that January ATA time frame from a lot of bow companies, but I mean Hoyt has, typically been in that October or November time frame.
Yeah, for the most part. The January thing, there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of those things out there, but what a lot of people don't understand is there's an eastern part of the country and there's a western part of the country. And what's best for the eastern dealers is not necessarily what's best for the western dealers. And if you launch a bow, say January, February, and there's any kind of delays, whether it's something goes wrong or demand is really high and it's hard to deliver bows, then you start pushing yourself up against the selling season for for the Western market.
Yep.
Because their seasons come in a lot earlier.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, and I think that's probably a big aspect that a lot of the whitetail guys don't think about is that big season change, and obviously a lot of those bow shops and guys wanting to get their hands on their bows earlier out there.
Are those kind of over? When I've never really tracked like the ending of some of the Western archery seasons. Are there a lot of those still happening?
No. A lot of those, kind of wind down at the end of September.
End of September.
So, yeah.
Really?
Yep. Specifically elk season obviously is the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the big push. And those guys, those dealers get busy, 4 or 5 months in front of Eastern dealers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard to believe. Yeah, because I guess a lot of the gun seasons for, elk and mule deer in October into November, and then by then snow's starting to roll in the high country, and it probably
what a different world
shuts
out
it down.
there, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is such a different world, and it's funny because the Eastern people think one way. They say, well, this is what needs to be best. This is what we need to do, and then the Western guys go, oh no. And so it's a fun dynamic, and it keeps a balance with us because we have 14 guys that are spanning the entire country. And when we sit in rooms and meetings, you get to hear, that side and then the other side as well. So I can assure you that whatever it is, there's some really smart people in the room that are overseeing all of it. And they're making the best decision for, the entire country.
Yeah. Makes sense. So Mick, I mean, obviously born and raised in Texas. I mean, how'd you get into hunting? Was it your dad got you into it? Like how'd you fall into that situation?
It's kind of close to me right now because I was just able to buy the property that I killed my first deer on. It was an undivided piece of property. Never saw it coming. It was actually aired out to a lady from a different area, and she decided she wanted to sell it. Well, for 42 years, I've walked on that property, and it's a really expensive piece of property. Never really realized that until it come time to have to pony up or it be gone. And so I was able to work with my sister and brother. We actually have a really good relationship, and we were actually able to save the property that we grew up on, and I hunted on my entire life. So basically my granddad, was my best friend. And I sat with him. I can remember the first deer I ever killed. I can remember drinking a Pepsi. I mean, I was 6 years old, and I can remember the Pepsi can, we actually put it on the limb where the deer was laying. And it's wild that you can think back that far, but that's what got me into it. And that was just a button buck, but it's the feeling that we all chase, and it's hard to define, but the feeling that I got that day as a 6-year-old kid was the same feeling when I killed, the drop tine buck that you guys have seen. And just depending on where you are in your evolution of hunting, you're constantly trying to not better that, but to find that feeling or find that situation again and again and again. So, I would say my grandfather got me into it, and I've hunted my entire life.
Yeah. And so, at what point was bow hunting kind of factored into your style of hunting?
Coming from East Texas, it's one of the challenges of Texas. Is especially in the archery market is bow season starts October 1st, and it's 95 to 100 degrees the entire month. There's no pre-rut activity to speak of at all. You don't see a lot of people bow hunt that month unless they're hunting on a farm or high fence or something like that, because deer just don't move. They don't do deer things. So you don't start out as a young age as a bow hunter in East Texas. And I think you have to have success young with a gun here. That's the way everybody starts, because we have such a liberal gun season. which starts the first Saturday of November, and it goes all the way to, if you include muzzleloader, it goes all the way to like January 20th.
Wow.
So we have this super long gun season, but like everything else in hunting, when you get on that evolution, you get to a point where you want to try something new, or you want a new experience. And when I was, oddly enough, when I was 14 years old, I bought my first bow with my own money. It was a Hoyt Magnatech, and I bought it from a dealer that I ended up being their rep, all these years later. So it was, that's how I got started. No one taught me. It was self-taught. I went in, I was embarrassed, as probably is maybe a lot of people that start out with a bow. They don't want to show their ignorance, and
Right.
it's no shame in it. You just don't know until you do it. But I went in and I picked a package bow, because I didn't want to ask any questions, because I didn't want to show what I didn't know.
Right.
So I got a package bow with a quiver and a rest and everything already on it. Went home, started shooting it, taught myself. Obviously, my draw length wasn't right. The setup was probably horrendous, but I actually somehow figured out how to kill with it. But that put in me that excitement for bow hunting, and that's the love of it, and the fun of it is you can start there, and then there's so much more to go, and you can build on that over the years, and you never really get to the end of it. I'm still building, even though I've been entrenched in archery really my whole life.
Yeah.
What do you think sparked the interest, Mick, to go and pick up a bow for the first time, if you didn't have any family members, or what influenced you to go and check that out?
It was more so the idea of getting to hunt earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You would see deer in fields and things like that, and I'm like, man, if I could only hunt those deer in October. And then that's not realizing how hard October really is,
Right.
to hunt here, because what a lot of people don't understand is like, we don't have crops here, like, at all. You don't drive down the road and there's a cornfield or a bean field or alfalfa or anything like that. So, this is timber country. It's pine country. It's southern hunting. And so you get into that and you realize, a deer can take a different trail every day. There's nothing that funnels the deer. There's nothing that, makes them repeat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So just the challenge of it.
What is like the primary food source down there? Are there like mass bearing trees? Is it all just forbs and like random shrubbery and stuff?
That's it. It's random shrubbery. And the problem is we don't get cold enough to affect it.
Right.
So, you can't, and it's all over the woods. And, our Texas Forest Service, they manage our forest very well, 4 different forbs and things like that. And so outside of, the acorn production, that's what you've got.
Wow.
Yeah. So there is an acorn crop though?
There is, but it's not defined. It's all over.
Yeah.
So it's like the deer I killed the other day. It is the weirdest story, but and I'll plug Lone Wolf Custom, not for you guys, but for my own self. I actually bought a Lone Wolf Custom crossover, which is their new climber.
Yeah.
And it's very expensive. And I tell people, and they say, I can't believe you paid that much for that climber, but it's elite. I mean, it's everything that you guys know their other products to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, long story short, this deer, I knew him very well. I knew him. I had 4 years of history with him. I knew when he showed up. I knew when he left. I knew when he was going to shed. I knew everything. And on Saturday afternoon, 2 weeks ago, I get a picture from a friend and said, hey, do you know this deer? And it was him. Well, I didn't know really anyone knew about the deer because I had kept him pretty quiet. And I called the guy and I'm like, hey, who sent you this picture? And he said, oh, I can't tell you that. Can't tell you that. I said, well, at least tell me where he's got him. And he goes, oh, I can't tell you that, Mick. And I said, yeah. I said, I know where the deer is. I have plenty of history with him. And I just kind of popped off jokingly because it was a fun conversation. And I said, well, I'll call you and you can help me come drag him out. So it kind of lit a fire under me. And that was at 1:50. I get in my vehicle and I drive to this place. And I knew that I would have to kill him in his bed. And I had a pretty good idea that he was there that day because he was on a scrape at midnight. But he would come and he would go. He would only ever be there one day. And it's a very small property where I ended up killing him right on the edge of public. And because I had permission there. And it was like a 2-year cutover that I would say the brush was about 8 foot high.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in at 2:00 and sneak into his bed, and I climb a tree with that lone wolf crossover, which anybody that's looked into it, if you're a southern hunter, for sure, we have a lot of straight timber in our area. And if you're going to mobile hunt, climber is king down here.
Wow.
I mean, you're running and gunning and you're climbing and coming down. I mean, because we have tons of options when it comes to a climber. Same way in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, places like that.
And you got to get high in a lot of those big straight trees because they don't have a lot of cover low.
Yeah, you do. So I go in there, and two, the crossovers, I don't know if you would call it modular, but it's got a module where it fits together and tightens. So you can take that stand and you can shake it and it's dead quiet. It makes zero noise. It's got the belts like the old Alpha climbs, and it's just bulletproof. And I climb this tree and I'm in the tree at about 2:15, and maybe 10 minutes went by and I see something just out of the corner of my eye, and I look over and the deer's bedded 32 yards from me. He was there the entire time, and he was in his bed when I got there and climbed that tree. I unlatched the climber, put it on the tree, and went up the tree, and the deer never knew I was there. And I had to wait until he stood up, and he just stood up to stretch. He wasn't doing anything. He was, he wasn't eating, nothing like that. And it was just literally, I had to be right on top of him. And that's the way it goes, though. You can't plan those type things out. But I do, not to plug Lone Wolf too hard, but I do give Lone Wolf credit for that kill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is.
I did the same thing this year, dude. I hung with it, and I didn't know it until later on. Maybe he was more like 50, 60 yards.
Close.
But I mean, I was hanging quiet like I always do, but it wasn't like, hey, he's 50 yards quiet. It wasn't in my mind, nor was Mick's. But the fact that you can do that and then look up and like, there they are, that's like, holy cow.
Yeah, right on them.
Yeah, definitely. Equipment matters. If I'd have went belling off in there, like an elephant, clanking up a tree, it would have never happened. And interestingly enough, I had been accessing that spot by a different trail, and I had hunted it that morning actually. And 4 doe came out and they cut my track across that trail as they traversed the hill. And it struck me as they're potentially bedded on that knob. So when I left, I actually went out that morning from a different direction. And when I killed him, it was the first time I accessed it from that lower access. And where he was actually was on that knob where he was bedded. And had I walked in the way that I had been coming in, it would have blown him out when I got there. So it just makes me wonder, which I didn't hunt it that many times, but it just makes me wonder, the hunts that I did have there, did I push him each time I went in?
Well, we talk about that all the time. I mean, it's one thing when you're in the stand and, whatever, you see the buck and he catches your wind, or, like that doe that came in and she cut your trail and he kind of went with her. You think about all the ones you don't see. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of deer that get downwind of you, or you bump, or whatever that
they know how those properties work.
Oh yeah.
And, I mean, they grew up there. There's been, they've been there 3, 4, 5 years, and they've seen, well, hey, the trucks come from that way, and generally they're this, and then they move on.
Yeah, they're patterning us.
Yeah, so they know, and like we might think we're being discreet and stuff, but that's why every movement mattered. Like even on if you're driving a UTV in there or whatever, and it's not like you can do this every hunt because there's just not that many possibilities. But I have also noticed that hunt that I had on the backside of the ditch on the East Twin this year was an example of the same thing. It was the first time I'd ever come in from a different direction, and I was like, I've never done this before. I don't know. I had to go in and hang my lone wolf. I was using the 0.5 in the dark, but I was like, it makes too much sense not to try it, and I had one of the best hunts that I had on that farm. The bucks were just doing all the buck stuff, and I passed a slammer 3-year-old that morning. So, and learned a lot. So,
yeah, I think a lot of times, if you'll just stop and ask yourself, if 10 people were going in here to hunt today, what would they do?
Yeah.
And generally 8 out of 10 would do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And to kill these giants, it's the 1%, they're the 1% that you're after. So they're going to do 1% things. It's like the 225 I killed in Kansas. Y'all know the story. I kill him right beside the road.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally, he was a legend. People knew of him. People were after him, and there was a lot of people with access to that property. But he would sit there by the road in that ditch and he would watch oil traffic come in and people drive in. And, you weren't going to kill him in the back of that property, and that property was almost 2,000 acres. And literally I killed him 50 yards from the road.
Yeah. You hear about that a lot. These big mature bucks are not dumb. And, sometimes they're doing the stuff that, if you try to think logically, you're like, that doesn't really make sense. But it's because everybody else is doing that same thing, right? They have to respond to that pressure. They have to change their movement. Yeah, and I think that's, even when we look at like we're in gun season here now, or in a lot of areas are, just coming out of gun season, these deer have been pressured. We always think it's amazing when we're like, wow, how did this deer survive gun season? And it's like they find the spot, they realize that, wow, you know what? I'm going to be secure here, and they do the same damn thing year after year.
HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by DeerGro.
Man, we've been using DeerGro products for a long time. The Plot Start and Plot Boost, more recently Plot Till. Now we've got 3 new liquid fertilizers that have been put in the mix that will cover everything we could want for a food plot program.
It's huge, man. The more food plotting we do, it's like, man, the liquids just make sense. Like whether it's herbicides or the Plot Start and Plot Boost, and now the fertilizers getting mixed in. It's like, man, I can combine all of those in certain cases and do less passes for more results.
It's all about efficiency. Like you said, less passes. If you're out there treating your beans with glyphosate in the summertime, you can mix in this fertilizer, do that all at once. You have the boost in there to help some metabolism. It's all about efficiency when we're talking about food plots. And really the big difference on these liquid fertilizers is you're bypassing some of these soil limitations, pH limitations, the soil type. In a lot of cases, we talk about dry fertilizers only being available for 17% of what you put down in the first year. These liquid fertilizers straight into the plant are 90% available in the first year. Huge difference in what you're going to see in growth.
It's huge. And so right now you can use code HUNTR15 for 15% off any of the DeerGro products on their website. And as always,
better food plots, bigger deer.
That's right.
Tell me if I'm crazy on this, but like, have you noticed a difference on like when you see does and stuff and young bucks, like in just out, like they'll bust you, you know what I mean? They'll catch your wind or they'll see you, and it's like, okay, you have that perception of their, but doesn't it seem different? Like when you see a mature buck, like especially a 5+ year old buck, when you see them, like those encounters, that we've had and stuff, like, doesn't it seem like they've thought about it? Like not so much like, oh, hey, he just got my wind on a whim, or it's like, that's that methodical nature that I guess that we're talking. When you see them, you're like, oh, they've thought about this.
They're already thinking it. Yeah.
There's and it's only by outsmarting them in most cases, or pure luck, that you outsmart to be able to even get that close to them to see that happening. But there's definitely a different mindset that they have.
Well, I think, it goes along the lines of, I use this term a lot, and people talk about all the time that we're trying to stack the odds. We're trying to stack the odds. We're trying to stack the odds. But, no different than baseball shift or basketball analytics. There's analytics in hunting. It's one of the things that I enjoy the most about the game is building on the analytical part of it. to try to put myself not only in the right state, but the right region, the right individual county, the right property, because a lot goes into, whether you're in the right state or you're on the right individual property to even produce the 1% deer. And when you really start breaking those things down, I mean, the sky's the limit. You never run out of things that you can come up with, to build that case for the hunt. And, as little as if a deer gets to 6 years old, he didn't do certain things.
Right.
It might not be because he wasn't smart at 2, but maybe his mother was, and she positioned him specifically when he was that young. And so, the type of animal that you're hunting, when you talk about hunting the 1%, it is a different thing, because he's not the deer running doe all over the place, because he would be dead.
He'd be dead.
Because he probably was a superstar at 3 years old. So there's a lot of people that would have killed him then. So if you think you're going to kill him in an obvious scenario, it's not going to happen.
Well, I think that's the hard part for a lot of people is like, we talk about this even with like the managed property side, a lot of these properties you're setting up because you're anticipating the deer to do deer things. So you set the property up for those situations, whether it's food plots, stand locations, timber cuts, whatever. Right. And you can kill a deer that way. You can kill a lot of deer that way. But when you get into these like exclusive 1% type deer, they get to that high quality and that age by doing things that are not the standard practice.
Different stuff. And you can predict it. You can get ahead of it, but it's just really hard to just hear people say it or like even like see it on TV or whatever, whatever you can take from that until you've seen it for yourself on your own property. You're like, oh, I get it. Like I watched, these 3 groups of does do this or over a course of years, I've seen all these different deer do this. And then, but finally I saw that one older one and here's what he did. And it's never just one instance. It's like, the whole course of your, hunting career, honestly, you're taking that in.
Yeah. It flashes before your eyes right there.
But you do get better at like, for instance, I was pretty proud of my encounter with that 5-year-old buck in Illinois this year. So without like going into the whole detail here, I was like, I had this whole perception of I'd seen him locked down 2 days before. And I knew kind of what the travel route would be there. And not that I expected to see him there. Yeah. But it didn't surprise me afterwards that that's what he did.
Sure.
And granted, you could make an argument that's a spot that you're going to see deer too. But
I mean, it was the first time he's ever done it and I haven't seen him do it again.
And in the same way.
Right?
Yes.
He's not done it
I was
again.
there. It was the one time he got, and I knew, I was like, it's only going to be one time. He's going to get up one time and he's going to do the thing. And I was there for it.
He's never done it again.
I was there for it. I did everything except kill the deer. And the mistake that I made was there's only one way to access this point, and the doe that he was with got my ground scent and just boogered, and he just went with her. So we'll adjust, and I'll kill him next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that, I don't know if it's a benefit or not, but, being from Texas, I have to travel to hunt, especially the Midwest. And, being fortunate enough to get to hunt those states, you learn a lot by hunting different environments and things like that. We laugh all the time about, guys that just live in the Midwest or they just hunt, their specific dirt. They can be very successful, but it's a challenge, to go to an area and when we say 1%, that doesn't mean 200. That means whatever the 1% is for that region.
Right.
And you can learn a lot by hunting, different type terrains, Midwest, North, Northeast, and even the South.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that, and again, it isn't a knock on the Midwest, but we talk about it a lot is, when you take guys from areas that it's harder to kill mature deer just in general because of the situations, because of the pressure, they're just not there, and you have to work harder even when you get put into a different environment, let's say a more farmland environment like the Midwest, your ability to think like where you need to kill this big deer or where he's going to be is so heightened because of you've just had to climb the mountain in your everyday hunting life, basically, from your home areas.
Well, when I started going to Kansas, I think I started going to Kansas about 18 years ago, maybe a little longer. But, I did what everybody else does. If you're coming from the South, everybody stops on the southern border. They think I'm in Kansas and it's all the same,
Mm-hmm.
and, over time it was great, and you take some of those Southeast counties, they used to be unbelievable.
Yeah.
But now the pressure from the Texans and the Oklahomans and Louisianans and things like that, because that's the first stop,
Yeah.
along with their 80-acre rule, as far as if you buy 80 acres, you automatically get a tag, and then crossbow
Mhm.
legalization and all these different things. You can see what the pressure has done to their deer herd. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
my best friend is an outfitter there, and it's unbelievable, the fall from grace, which is that portion of Kansas. So what I did was, when I saw it happen, and I moved. And so I moved to the north, and it was great. First year up there, I killed a 186 in September. I thought, this is it. I found it. And 3 years later, same thing happened there.
Yeah.
So I run from that and run to a different area of Kansas and found success there. And now same thing's happening there. So, it's just part of that analytical approach where you pressure, the soil, everything plays into, am I in the right place for that finite amount of time that you have during hunting season to give yourself, the best opportunity for success.
Well, Mick, let's talk Kansas a little bit. I mean, obviously, the three of us, that's a state that's always close to our hearts. I started hunting Kansas, I guess it's 11 years ago, so not quite as long as you did, but saw a lot of the same stuff that you're talking about. Obviously, they've got a tag allocation, and more so now we're seeing, like, it used to be, I mean, hell, they had leftovers, right? So after the draw, you just bought your archer tag over the counter. That's how I started doing it. Then it was draw. Yep. Now it's like, okay, you might need a point. In some cases, people are now saying maybe you need 2 points. I mean, obviously, the demand is still there, and we're seeing some of the age structure and stuff really start to take effect. I mean, what does that look like here? I mean, at some point, is Kansas destined to be in Iowa where it's a 4 or 5 point draw state?
No, I don't think so. I think it's peaked out. Because there was an influence that caused that. Two main influences that caused that. So years ago, when I first started going, you could get a landowner's tag. You could buy a landowner's tag, and it was hard to get a tag back then. And then they took the landowner's tag away from them and added it to the non-resident draw, which increased the number of tags for non-residents. So that was one big influence that upped the pressure, number one, but it upped the number of people who were actually hunting there.
Can you walk that out for me real quick, Mick? How did that increase? Yeah. It's not necessarily more tags, right?
Well, it's not necessarily more tags, but you have more. If a non-resident gets the tag, he's going hunting.
Yeah.
If a landowner is a farmer, and he may not have ever hunted, he may not care. And if he could transfer his tag, then you had that many more people coming.
Yeah.
And then that was the point to where everybody draw. Everybody was getting a tag and nobody didn't draw. And so what ended up happening there was you were running about, I think it was 16 to 18,000, somewhere around that number as far as applicants. So there would be anywhere from a 1,500 to 2,000 leftover tags a year.
Right.
No big deal.
Yep.
And so then crossbows were legalized during the archery season.
Yeah, that was 2013, I think, or 2013, 14.
Right. So in essence, what you did, and we're far enough out from it now that we can look at the analytics of it, that added somewhere around 13 to 15,000 applicants a year, whether they were coming from the gun side or where they came from. But that was added to that 16,000 or whatever. And based on Kansas's draw stat report, I think it was somewhere around 31 or 32,000 applicants this year for 22,000 tags.
Wow.
So there's 10,000 people right now from just this year that are going into next year with at least 1 point, and there's 22,000 tags. So that's really what's happening as far as it taking a point to draw or 2 points to draw. Unless there's some kind of major influencer that they change regulations or something like that, I don't think it goes up very much more.
Mm-hmm.
And it could work in reverse. I mean, reality is, if they ban baiting there, and I know it's on the table and they've talked about it, if they ban baiting, those applicants go down
Yeah,
at
for
that
sure.
point. So then maybe everybody draws again or close to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think other states have a factor as well. I mean, I think that's where, I mean, the reason Iowa has so many applicants is like they've done some things right, but also there's a lot of other states doing a lot of things wrong. And so you got guys like us from Pennsylvania and you from Texas, flocking to that state. And so some of it is in Kansas's control, but a lot of it isn't too. I think as other states continue to neglect their deer herd or do things, I think people will continue to go there.
Well, you guys talk about it a lot. One of the things the states can do is make the hunt tougher.
Yep.
And that's where I have found, some special scenarios in Texas, specifically on public ground in Texas, is baiting is not allowed on public ground. Cameras are allowed here,
Mm-hmm.
but that goes hand in hand. Kansas, for instance, you can't obviously
not
bait
on public. Yeah.
or put cameras out.
Mm-hmm.
And however many of those things you're willing to stack against the hunter, you're protecting the health of the herd at that point.
Yeah.
And so you just create a more quality hunt, because people say, I mean, you come to the area I live in. I ran a pretty high stakes big buck contest for a company for about 7 years. And when I say high stakes, I don't know. I would say first place payout was somewhere between 15 and 20,000 in
Substantial.
what the awards were. And we had about 1,000 entries a year, and 140-inch deer here would be in the top 3, top 5. And rarely would I score a deer that would go over 160, and generally a 150 would win it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's context behind what there is here. Now, everyone here, it's not a competitive environment. It's not a destination state. I say state, I shouldn't say that. It's not a destination region. Everybody thinks of Texas and they think South Texas, high fence. They think West Texas, which is somewhat smaller deer. But in the eastern portion of Texas, there's some really good deer. But no one's trying to lease land here. No one's trying. It's a hard hunt. It takes a lot of time. So people can get access if they want it. They can lease land if they want it. They can, people will give you permission still if you want it, but they put a feeder on it or a corn pile. You've got a 3-month gun season, and we have small parcels here. We don't have big parcels like a lot of Texas. So if every 10 and 20 and 40 and 10 and 5 and 10 and 20 and 40 stacked back to back to back has 1 to 3 feeders on it and 1 to 3 to 5 guns on it, your uncle's brother's son.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's the deer? What kind of chance do you have for a deer, number one, to get to 5 years old, but number two, for the genetic makeup not to be manipulated, because we have a 1 buck system here per county, and there's no culling mechanism,
Right.
because we have a 13-inch rule also. So it's a double negative. Like we incentivize, or we force people to shoot your superstar genetics, young deer.
Yep.
But we have no way
Killing
to cull
those big old ones.
That's right. So you end up with a lot of 8 points on private land and things like that.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because like we just talked with Ben Rising about it in Ohio, where traditionally these 200 and 300 acre farms that were hunted by, a couple guys, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys, even in some cases, are now being divided into 5 or 6 tracks at least, of which each track has 2 or 3 guys on it. Right. So you go from a 200 or 300 acre parcel that was hunted 5 guys maybe to that same size acreage having 15. Like it's just the deer don't stand a chance.
I also kind of just don't understand like the thought process in buying that. Like if they think that that's going to,
it's all they can afford.
Well, I know it's all they can afford, but I just also, maybe they just don't have the perception. Like, do they think that whatever they're being sold is like, here's the deer that are here, that's going to still be possible after that's all happened?
Yeah, it's potential.
Well, Jared, they don't understand. Most people don't understand. You said it. it's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand the reality of, like, from a 10,000 foot view of what there really is. And it's like some of the public land stuff I hunt, when you've got, say, 60, 70, 80 cameras spread out over 10 miles. And I work together with a couple other guys, and we share information. But when you look at it and you go, well, we're getting the same bucks on camera, and it's this one and this one, you go, there's not near as many 5 and 6 year old bucks out there as I thought there were, and, to think that you're going to pile 3 or 4 or 5 guns on, or I say guns, any weapon on any piece of property. Everybody if you put money in, you expect to bring a deer off the place, but it's unsustainable. It's just not sustainable at all.
It is.
Yeah.
It is an unfathomable number. We've never done the math, but I mean, Jeremy and I talk to a lot of guys who have access to a lot of land, like primo stuff across, like, and to hear, the amount of acreage and what they're having to do to find good, good deer or deer in a certain age class. It's just like, there's just no way. I mean, I guess, Mick, we've talked about this. I mean, maybe that's one of why you reached out to us initially. We were, pounding our heads against the wall trying to come up with whatever, a 5-year-old deer or like maybe a booner was the goal or something on this finite amount of access. And it's just like, the number of properties that can yield that result, they're almost non-existent, and they're probably getting to be fewer and fewer. So they
are. I mean, yeah. Go ahead,
well,
Mick.
the other part, that you have to ask yourself is, where are you? Where are your expectations? Where are you in your evolution? Because as you start to look for, the 1%er or the 5%er, you have to go to them. Like, to think you're going to lease a piece of property and hope that you have a 1% buck, or you buy a piece of property and depending on what the state is, and you're going to have that 1%. If you'll watch the guys that are consistently killing really big deer, regardless of the state, they're going to the deer.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Either they're hearing about the deer through the grapevine, whatever it is, their approach is they get information. They already have a preconceived idea of what areas grow these type deer, and then they go specifically to the deer. And I mean, that really is the game. Otherwise, you're gonna be very inconsistent at killing, top end bucks.
I mean, we've talked about this with a lot of guys, and it's and honestly, it's kind of not our style, because we like the management aspect, we like having the property, and we like following the deer. But most of these guys who are killing these consistent bucks, number one, they're going places. Number two is that they essentially have they're surveying, or they're covering with cameras 50, 60 different properties. Like, they are surveying different herds in different areas of the same general region, but it's not like they've just got 10 cameras saturating an 800 acre chunk. They're surveying this 40, this 60, this 150, this 80.
Do you remember what he told us? I mean, Bobby Kendall was the one we talked to most recently. He was probably surveying
like 50 properties.
Like 50 properties across Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas. And what did he say? He's like, I've got like 10 5-year-olds or something.
I think he had 10 deer over 170.
Like 10 deer over 170 on like the best stuff you could probably
Illinois,
imagine.
Iowa, Kansas.
You know what I mean? And his connections are awesome. You know what I mean? So it's like,
and you're probably talking 5,000 plus acres over those, or more. It's probably with the Kansas stuff, it's like 10,000 plus acres.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not, I mean, we laugh about it because, in hindsight of what happened in Iowa, but
we're like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing okay.
Yeah, there's not a booner around every tree, but like, even if you think of, like, take Iowa out, between our Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and Illinois stuff that we're monitoring. I don't know. I mean, a lot of acreage. We don't have a booner on camera.
No.
Like, we don't have one on camera.
I don't even know. I don't even have word.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
There was like, one deer I knew of in the summer that's like maybe within a few miles, but
we have no idea. It's just when people start to think about this, and even when
they're
we start
so
to go,
rare.
Well,
they're so rare.
Even when we start to go to the mature aspect of things, Mick, it's like the mature deer there's so few of them in the herd. It's like when we talk about evolution of bow hunters, and Jared and I always get to hear the purest thing or whatever. It's like, no, the fact is we just want an older age structure so that people can understand what it's like to hunt, experience, view, see, and possibly kill a mature whitetail buck in their state. It's amazing. You'll never go back once you do it.
No, I tell people this. So, and I'd killed some really nice deer previous in my life, but in 2018, when I killed that 186, I shot him off the ground on September 12th in the morning. So, I mean, all the odds were stacked against that hunt. And I'm not going to act like I was some ninja going in there, because I probably blew every deer in there out. It felt like it was not a good decision, but I had watched him really close in the summer. And anytime I had that wind with that temperature, he always daylighted in the mornings on the edge of a cornfield. And sure enough, he was within 10 minutes of when I thought he was going to be there. But the point is, he went into the field when I shot him, gave him a little bit of time. And when I went in, I mean, just it looked like a fire hydrant from how much blood there was. And when I turned down the road that he was laying on, it hit me like what he was. I mean, I really didn't know what he was. And when I walked up to him, it was just a different animal. Like you guys know, it was a different animal, and it changed me. When I saw that and put my hands on that, he had 27.5-inch main beams. He was 24 inches wide. He had 16 points and 43 inches of mass. I mean, just freak. And I'm like, now this is what I want.
Yeah.
Like, now we're in the game.
Yeah.
And so, then that's what I wanted. And I wanted to hunt those. And I will say, even though I'm an archery guy, it's the industry I'm in. I love archery. That's not my hunting game. My hunting game, I love whitetails. I love whitetail hunting. I love the experience of it. I want to hunt from September to the last tag that's available in February. And I want to kill them with a bow. I want to kill them with whatever is legal. And I want to experience the fullness of whitetail. And so when I hear guys say, oh, I only bow hunt, I go, man, that's like a kid daddy saying, oh, well, you can only play one sport. Like, man, there's so much more out there, and the experiences of September, sitting in that grass, in some of these states and hunting those early season bucks all the way to, like this year I have a muzzleloader tag in Iowa late season. Hopefully I'll be sitting in the snow, looking for something totally different. So, yeah.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Lone Wolf Custom Gear.
Man, Jared, we are tree stand fanatics, and I think the one thing that we have learned over all these years is to kill big bucks, we got to be mobile. We've been hunting out of Lone Wolves for many years, the original Lone Wolf, and then obviously with the custom gear stuff, we're using the .5 and the .75. Yeah. And the one thing that we talked about is like, what if there were no cables? Here we are.
I really just don't know how you can beat it, frankly. But, a lot of that came, too, from a relationship that we've built with the DePustos. We've had both Cody and Andre on the podcast a few times. The passion for hunting, the outlook on the sport and stuff, I think is eye to eye with how we look at it. Everything that has gone into building this brand and to building these tree stands is something that we want to be a part of.
This is the 40th anniversary of these guys creating tree stands that have been critical to how we hunt whitetail deer today. If you look over the past, you'll see Andre's designs being implemented across so many stands over the years. Such a cool thing, but really has changed the way that we all hunt whitetail deer from above now.
Right now, you can use code HUNTR, HUNTR, to get 7% off anything on the entire website. Be the lone wolf.
I think it's cool, man. I mean, it is something that, unfortunately, people look at it as pessimistic view, but boy, they're the states that are the primo states. Take Iowa out of there because of the limitation. You throw in Kansas, Illinois, Missouri, some of these states, Oklahoma. It's like it's not easy to find these big, old, mature deer anymore, and it just continues to get harder and harder. Whether that's because of access and/or limitation from tags, that I worry like. How far are we going to go before the guys like us who are looking for those deer literally cannot find them?
I would say this to that. So back to me running that contest for those years. I got to see every deer. I got to score them all. and they had to put the county where they killed them. And we also had a polygraph too, so you couldn't lie. And so, you know, like a whitetail guy does, I take note of every big buck I see and where they came from. So it was a very consistent pattern on what areas were throwing those genetics and what areas were throwing age structure. So the buck I killed last year on public land, Jared knows the story. You know, in my state, you get 3 buck tags and you can only kill 1 trophy in a county. And so I had tagged out on my home farm in the county I lived in, not knowing that I was not going to go to the Midwest because I had some things come up. Well, it was first week of November, and I needed a place to hunt. So I just kind of reached back and pulled from my knowledge from that contest. And I went, you know what, this area always had a buck or 2 in the top 3 every year. So where can I hunt there? Went down on a Wednesday, checked it out, found a lot of scrapes, a lot of rubs, different sign. And I killed him the first sit on November the 10th, and he was 161 and 6/8.
Wow.
I mean, but the point is, I mean, I got lucky on that. I mean, I had never been there before. It just all came together.
Yeah, that's okay.
It does, but I will say this, the information to put me in that area, you know, because 10 miles can make a big difference. Cause I'm one of these that believes, I don't as much believe in the food as I believe in what's feeding the food. I think the soil has a lot to do in the mineral deposits of what's feeding the food that they're eating. And I think a deer can eat the same plant 20 miles away and not get the same production as one in the right area.
For sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, obviously it takes a little bit of luck. I do think the thought process of putting yourself in the game for the deer that you're looking for is, I don't know if I want to say that it's overlooked, but I don't think enough hunters give that enough thought. Like, given most are kind of confined to the state that they're in, but even then, it's like, I'm not going to go behind my house here in Pennsylvania and say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to just hold out for that 160. There is no 160. it doesn't exist there. So I can hunt myself till I'm blue in the face. I'm never gonna kill that deer. He doesn't exist, right? He's not there. So,
well, there's just a reality to it now. Like,
like
they're, I don't know. Like the analogy that comes to mind is like trail cameras, kind of, because you were talking earlier about like, are they going to be harder to find, or do they not exist as much anymore? It's like I do think at a certain point, like there were quite a few of them. You know, I mean, they seem to be peaking. And I don't know, like whether they were actually peaking like pre-2000s or if some of the initial information that we got where we just started paying attention, like there was an industry that all of a sudden we're like, well, there's a lot of big deer out here, like in the Midwest or whatever. And then I think probably trail cameras was the thing, and especially cell cameras, that was like you almost lift the rock and all of everything scatters. Then it's like, okay, then for a period of time they were all still there where we lifted the rock from, and it's like, all right, in this and that, and we're crushing them as they're running out of there, And so there are definitely less, I would say, like because
yeah, I don't know if there's. Here's what I.
But
think.
Now the rock's gone, and there's no other rocks. It's like we see it all. So we have ultimate like.
Yeah, I personally think that there are less, and there will never be more than we had of like the super giants.
I agree.
And that's because cameras have allowed us to high grade the population, right? Like there are not many guys that are going to pass 170-inch 3-year-old deer. If they have him on camera and he's coming through, they're not passing
high grade, and also put a ceiling on age class, period.
Sure, absolutely. But during those random time frames, it was like, if a big buck broke across the field during Iowa gun season, they shot it. It wasn't like, who is he? What's his age? Like that thought process didn't happen before cameras. So a lot of those deer, I think, and especially those super 1%ers who don't do what the other deer do, got to be the super giants, like the Jim Jordan bucks, the deer that we see in the Kings of Bucks trailer that were world record type quality. I think very few of those deer are ever going to be reached again because we're more efficient killers than we've ever been. Yeah. We know who's out there. We know where they're at. We know what they're doing.
It's a much more controlled situation. Yeah. Well, and it's almost a shame. Like, we talked about, and I think Winky was mentioning it the other day on the podcast, like the days of the ghost buck, this one that's mysteriously appeared at, like, it was only rumor, like a folktale type thing. It's like those deer are just like, they don't exist anymore.
Because we know them.
Yeah, we know them all. And,
Yeah. I mean, I had a new buck. It was a 3-year-old, right? But like I had a new buck in Kentucky show up, in Ohio last night. And I'm like, damn, that's a nice 3-year-old. I look back, I have him in August. Mm-hmm. Like, had I not had like cameras or anything, it would be like, yep, there he is. Like new buck shows up.
Well, then don't discount the machine, which is social media.
Yeah.
That's true. It's trained and taught more and more people how to target these bucks, and where to go, what to do, when to do it. And I can see it in early season hunting. I mean, I've had some conversations, and some reports about this with some of my manufacturers is, the hunting is starting so much earlier than it ever has. I mean, look at social media this year in Kentucky.
Oh yeah.
And the velvet hunts that are being added to different states.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma talking about the velvet hunt.
Tennessee,
Arkansas,
Mississippi's got one now.
I mean, Kansas has had it, and I've never seen as many people in early season in Kansas as there was this year.
Really?
So, reality is you get those guys with that head hunting style, they find out about a buck, all it takes is a farmer calling the right guy or whatever, and they're on it.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of it. I mean, we talk about those tools too. I mean, the one thing, if we go back go 18 years ago when you started hunting Kansas and stuff, the things that didn't exist, and I'm not knocking them because they're huge, valuable tools. It's like, think of the digital mapping apps. That has, I mean, but until cell cameras,
it took the whole world and put it right here.
Boom, just blew it up. Who is this guy? Where's this property line? What's that look like down there? Does this have any terrain? Oh, there it is. Like, those are the things that, like, when you talk about lifting that rock, it's like,
dude, just in life in general. I mean, hunting for sure, because that's what we're talking about. But like the world of MapQuest versus like the GPS on your TomTom or on your phone, it's just like it is an entirely different. That's one of the biggest innovations probably of mankind.
I know, because Mick and I are the old guys here, right? Like having to print it out, like MapQuest directions.
I did too. My dad used to take me to dirtback treks, and I was the navigator.
I'm like, was that the left? Was that the left?
Yeah, you missed it 86 miles ago.
Yeah, I'm on line number 87 already.
The odometer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to that point, I mean, I'm in the process right now of, I won't say too much, but I've found this 2-acre little piece of property. I mean, it's on a dead end road. It's worthless. I mean, it is abandoned. It's worthless to anybody, and it is literally the missing puzzle piece to killing giants. And it's 2 acres. Well, I would have never known that draw and the way that all laid out without Onyx and Spartan Forge and, looking at the LiDAR maps and going, oh yeah, this is exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And, that's just when that happens across the terrain over and over and over and over again, man, it seems like the world's just getting small out there.
It is, man. I mean, that's the stuff that it was kind of the local folklore.
Honestly,
like you didn't know
it's been small for longer than we knew probably. Like we'll even hear stuff in hindsight, like, like even our farm in Illinois, like we'll find out years later, it's like, oh yeah, there was guys that looked at it before us type of thing. And we're like, oh yeah, of course you did. And there's just no way. I mean, there are some guys, as much as we want to try to be getting ahead of the game or find our own piece or whatever, it's like, there's always guys that are gonna have the first sniff at it or whatever,
Well, and I just think it's the game we play, right? I mean, we've got to, it's a love-hate thing. We hate to see it, but it's also part of the challenge to, build your next season, build your next October 20th, build your next November 10th, and what your season's going to look like next year and where you're going to be.
Yeah. Well, it's just, you and I have talked about, it's just irons in the fire. I mean, it's like you can, or maybe it seems sometimes like guys that are, consuming like even a YouTube video or something that's been produced on it. It's like, it seems in a lot of times it's like a linear path to like, okay, I learned about this deer and then I found his sheds and I planted his food plot and then I killed him at 7.5 years old or whatever. And it's like, I've experienced enough for myself and also talked to enough guys to know that that's never how it happens. It's always there's 13 other deer that fell off the radar, or, things that came up, or properties that were lost, or, things that happen in between. So, you just have to be ready for them when they do happen. And, I think celebrate them as much as you can when they do. Like, my Iowa buck this year was a great example of that. It's like, who knows? Like, I wasn't even giving that deer a thought until we were, basically weeks before we're heading there. And I've got all these other states and puzzle pieces that I'm trying to fit together. And like, who knew that I would end up shooting that deer, or, or who knows, even before this season is over, like another one's going to work out. And so like, as much as I feel like I'm always pushing forward, there's like a million different irons in the fire, but you got to have that. And the odds are some of them are going to work out.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting when you get into some of those, thought process, like even your Iowa buck, and we've talked about it, like, did the neighbors know about it? Were they hunting him? It's the previous landowner had pictures of him from
previous 2 years.
2 years. Yeah. And so it's like, when you think about it, and we talk about Kansas is the best example. I think it's like, there are some places that I'm like, boy, I don't know how many people have seen these deer. Like, there's some deer out there that slide under the radar in some of those areas. But when you start coming back to, probably even where you're at, Mick, in East Texas, or up here, like Ohio and stuff, I'm like, boy, I don't know any deer that are really flying under the radar. Like, people just, like your buddy sending you that picture, you're like, how in the hell did he get this thing? They just, people know.
Well, dude, there's something to be said for a fresh set of eyes, maybe like a who knows, like that deer that I killed in Iowa, for sure people probably were hunting it on maybe not the immediate neighboring property and stuff, but I know people knew about it and stuff, and it's kind of like it would maybe anger somebody. It would anger me as like the land. If I was the guy hunting it and I knew that somebody just came in and killed it in the first 2 hours, I would be like, come on, are you kidding me? Like, believe me, I get that mindset. But had I been hunting that property, like for any period of time before, I don't know, give me any more input than I had on it, maybe I wouldn't have done what I did. Maybe I would have been afraid to go, and I was like, maybe I would never walk down there and do that. But the reality too is that things can just work like that. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people are like, oh, of course you killed it on Beaumarsh, and they act like Beaumarsh Farm is like 100% turnkey. The reality is there's 15 of those farms. You know what I mean? He's never even hunted this one. And all that we had to go on was a bunch of failed food plots that he had some guys plant at some point, and he put a camera on a scrape. And dude, that's what big deer do. It's like we read the weather exactly right and just went to the spot, and he did what big deer do, and the timing just worked out.
Well, I think you can be too familiar with a farm, for sure. And you can get caught in a rut where you get real habitual. I own a 168 acre farm here in Texas, and I hunted it my whole life, and I grew up hunting it, and I just hunted it the way my granddad showed me how to hunt it. But I said, man, these deer are so nocturnal on this piece of property, and just forever they were so nocturnal. And about 6 years ago, I killed a 153 off of it, and I was like, yeah, that worked. And since then, I have figured out any mature buck that ends up on that property, you can kill him in that scenario or that situation, every single one of them. Mm-hmm. But only about 5% of that property can you kill a deer off of. The rest of them, you can monitor them, but it's that special situation. And it's a bed to food situation that's really tight. But I mean, you can set up beautiful property and go, oh, I'm going to hunt over here. I'm going to hunt over there. You're not going to kill those big mature bucks, but in that one situation. And I think so many people just continue to fail and do and fail and do and call themselves hunting, but they're sitting. They're not actually adjusting. They're not because they're so familiar.
Yeah,
that's right.
I honestly, I think that's one of the, try to spin this to where I'm not making it sound bad. I think that's one of the way that neighbors kill big bucks from well-managed properties is that people will set up a property. They'll plant food plots. They've got whatever. It's set up to a T for mature bucks, and they're on them. And then they'll hunt it the wrong way, and they'll push those deer out to a neighbor, and then it almost forms frustration. In fact, a lot of the guys sell their properties because they're like, my neighbors are just always killing the bucks. You're hunting your property wrong. You're pushing deer off of you, even though your property is the more attractive, and maybe they use the hell out of it at night.
Is one potential, right? You're not saying that's all. No,
I'm not saying that it's always. I mean, obviously,
deer just do stupid stuff.
Deer are gonna. There's property lines. They're gonna go over the property line. It doesn't matter. But I do think a big part of it is hunting it the wrong way and causing pressure on your property, which is pushing them on to a property where, frankly, in the case of like a Bomars, nobody's hunting it. Guy slips in there. That buck's like, man, nobody's ever here. Boom, you kill him.
Yeah.
So
that's what happens.
I see that scenario play out more times than not in a bait state or when someone's trying to use food. So box blinds, food, they'll try to put the deer where they want them to be instead of going to where they're going to be. And when you do that, you run the risk of, them being just strictly nocturnal on that spot. And you're not, like you said, you're not in the game. It's one of the things I love about public ground is generally public ground's a lot bigger.
Yep.
So, reality is just because you have a deer on camera doesn't mean he's killable on that property, especially if you're talking about a 60-acre piece, an 80-acre piece, whatever that is. But like in the public woods where you have 10,000 acres, 20,000 acres, you get to hunt that deer. If he's not daylighting somewhere, find him, find where he is.
Yep.
And just the whole, that's where the run and gun scenario comes in is, move until you find him. Yeah. And you can't do that on private ground. A lot of times, the biggest buck I've ever seen, it would have, I don't know where he ended up ranking, but it was 182 inches. I hunted him 4 years ago, and I learned that he was basically just crossing the fence and eating on me, and then he would cross the fence as soon as he got finished eating and going back. So I was trying to kill a deer that was spending not even 1% of his life on me, and I couldn't get access to the other piece of property.
Yeah, so it stuck.
Really, it opened my eyes to, just because you have him on camera doesn't mean you're even in the game.
Yeah. Well, and that we get that asked a lot. And not that we're the experts in it, but a lot of times people will say, hey, here's a picture of the farm. Here's where I got this deer. And it's whatever, 1:30 in the morning. And it's like, dude, I have no idea where that's deer. I was like, can you monitor anywhere around here? And they're like, no. You're out of the, I don't know what to tell you. Like you're not in the game.
It would be fun to be able to see like, what am I thinking of? It's like remember in science class, it's like something with the electrons or something where they're like very stagnant and they're just like moving real small. And then it gets hot or whatever. And then they start going like this and stuff. That's kind of what I envision like the deer herd doing like before and after dark. It's like they don't do anything during the day. Like, obviously, there's seasonal changes and stuff, but they're just there. They're just where they're at forever. And then as soon as it gets dark, like they'll get up and they'll go everywhere. Like they're eating people's shrubs in their yards. They're like, they're total comfort under cover of darkness. It's like they're just a totally different animal.
Yeah.
And of course you're gonna get pictures of them. Yeah, they covered 3 miles that night.
Well, that's my fascination around the thermal drone like survey aspect of it. I get it from a finding wounded deer, but like just being able to like throw that drone up and like look at, not even again because there are no private property lines when you get above into that airspace, but to cover whatever 3, 4, 5,000 acres in your area, it at whatever, say 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, right? And just see what are the deer doing? Where are they? Like how are they moving through? Like it's a complete eye opening to what's out there, because so many people are relying on like, hey, I've got my camera out, I'm not really seeing a lot. Well, maybe your camera's in a bad place, or maybe you're still on a scrape and all these deer are just crushing food and they're not even on it. Like there's a lot of things happening there that your perception of what is happening from a deer herd, standpoint isn't even close because of the way that you're summarizing your observations.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. I told the story of the 162 I killed last year on public ground on the first sit. Well, I had really no information on that spot, so it was fun going back this spring and looking at the why. I was able to backtrack the why because I didn't have a plan really going in. And I put a camera out in June, had actually 2 in that area, and I did not have a whitetail buck on camera all year. I still hadn't had one. And I say I still hadn't up until 2 days ago. So I go in 2 days ago, and I haven't hunted it because of that, as we tend to do. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's this other trail right here. This one's really beat down, which is one of the things that's really hard about hunting East Texas is hogs. You don't know what's a deer trail and what's a hog trail because they use the same trails a lot. Well, anyway, I moved the camera 10 yards and face it across another trail. And the very first night I had a mega 8-point. He had a broken main beam, but I would have hunted that deer. But I thought, man, nothing's in there. Hadn't got anything on camera. They would be using this trail. And it was literally 15 yards. They were 10, 15 yards. They're using that other trail.
Yeah. I don't think, I mean, it's funny when you think about the camera side of things. Like, it should be pretty easy. It's like, okay, here's a fresh scrape. I'm going to put a camera on it. Number one, we're learning more and more how these mature bucks especially are avoiding the cameras, whether it's, cell cameras, all cameras, infrared, flash, whatever. Like, there's avoidance happening.
To varying degrees, potentially avoiding properties because of cameras.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is like, people just like, they're, if you've got, whether it's a corn pile or it's a food plot, you just throw up a camera and they're like, yeah, I'm going to get pictures. It doesn't work that way. You're observing like this area by 20 yards or whatever. And that's it. And if you're going to base your entire hunt and summary off of that, and I did it for years, I was chasing pictures, right? And it's like, ultimately when I go in there, I'm like, this place is tore up. And it's like, I didn't hunt it because I just wasn't getting pictures of the buck that I thought I should have been getting in there. Was he in there? Maybe. Like, I relied 100% on this, 30-yard by 20-yard observation set. And that's probably not the way to do it in hindsight.
I would say more so anymore. I hang my stuff early, in the summer, and I'm just looking for proof of life.
Yeah.
I figure out how to hunt the farm, and I make decisions on where to kill them, not by camera, but by scouting and, boots on the ground. And then all I need to know is if he's there.
Yeah.
And there's some really high, there's some high, there's some high impact areas where you can figure if they're come into this property, I'm going to know he's here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's the biggest thing is like nobody wants to be hunting a ghost, right? Because like you said, we've got one November 5th to November 12th every year. I don't want to spend it hunting a deer that isn't even there.
Yep, for sure.
It's a weird dynamic. It's like, it's so hard to make that distinction between like, did I hunt, would you hunt a picture or like, because in literally in the same sentence, you could say like, I'm not going to hunt based on the camera. I just want to know he's there, which I would agree with, that's what we're trying to do too. But, it's November 3rd and there he is at 8:30 in the morning, and whatever about the property tells you he's about to like loop back in again. What do you do with that information? It's almost like you're an idiot if you don't go.
Yeah, you hunt it.
Well, and whether it's that spot or that tells you in your mind, I need to go to another spot type of a thing. And
yeah, but a lot of guys are waiting for that 8:30 picture in their brain, but really they already needed to be in the tree stand.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like they're like, well, he hasn't been there. He's going to show up. Well, yeah. As soon as he shows up, you're a step behind. Now you met.
For sure.
And you think about the buck I killed 2 weeks ago. The only thing that tipped me off to him was that he was on that scrape at midnight.
Yep.
I killed him 300 yards from that scrape in his bed. So I didn't go hunt that scrape because he came to the scrape. I went and hunted where I knew he was going to be, and I knew that if he did leave that area, it was going to be dark anyway.
Yeah.
So it was kind of I need to get in on him where he's at.
Yeah.
Where he's going to be, not where he was.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thought process that, as good as cameras and cell cameras especially have been, I think it's put a lot of hunters at a disadvantage because they're hunting the pictures and not the farm or the property, right? They're literally saying, okay, he's going to be here. He's going to be here. When he shows up, I'll be there. Well, they get the picture. They're not there. You're a step behind. Maybe he loops around. Maybe they're smart enough to say, okay, he was there at 8:30. Now I need to be up here this evening. I don't think that many guys are thinking Almost, I think they get frazzled at that point because now it's like he came through, he daylighted. Now what do I do?
Boy, it's tough. Like you're right. I agree, but like deer are creatures of habit, like in some capacity, even
In
the mature
some
ones.
capacity.
You know, so it's like if they do it once, like odds are they're gonna do it again.
Yeah, but you have to be there. Like how many of us have 60 days in a row to sit your ass in the same stand waiting for him to do it again?
Well, it may be that same day type of. I mean, that's where every situation is different. You know, it's like.
Well, think about it. I mean, how many times have you gotten a buck to come through and crush a scrape in, let's say, the morning during daylight hours and come back and hit that same thing during the same day?
Pretty often.
I would say I don't see it very often.
I see it pretty often, depending on the weather conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can almost call the shot. Like you can be like, yeah, he's gonna be there again. And scrapes are the most predictable.
I usually don't. I see
one.
him hit it once and like that was it. That was the chance.
Yeah, and it's logistical too. Like it's where you're at. Like
sure,
it's like this East Texas thing. You know, everybody goes, "Oh, we've got a cold front coming." Well, it's almost the worst thing here. You know, you do not want cold weather here. You know, north winds and stuff, they're shut down. If it's 30 or 40 degrees, they will not move. As soon as you get that warm front or the first south after multiple norths goes to 70 degrees right now, that's when they're going to be on their feet. I mean, it's just the opposite of the Midwest. I mean, it's unbelievable what triggers these deer to move.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it probably is the pressure aspect too. Like I don't know. If I see him hit a scrape in the daylight in the morning, he's probably not going to hit it in the evening. Like that was his ground.
Is your thought process primarily Pennsylvania as you're saying that?
No,
or?
Kentucky and Ohio.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just big woods and they're just making bigger loops. So they're just not getting back there in time from a daylight side.
If I see a mature buck hit a scrape in the morning and it's the right time, if it's like the last 5 days of October or the first 10 days of November and the rain just cleared or is getting ready to clear, like he's going to come hit it again.
You would think so.
I know so. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen enough. I'm sure you have too, but then there's times where they don't, right? It's got the situation has to, and like Mick is saying, it is logistical. It's like, you know,
sure.
If he's following a hot doe, then
he's not.
He's going and doing what he's doing. But
if it's just a bed scrape food type pattern, good chance, especially because he bedded close.
Yeah, and a lot of those scrapes are in like a. I mean, if the scrapes that I monitor are on like at the head or the intersection of like a buck and doe bedding area, so it's like he's likely going in. I'm like, okay, got it. He's on that edge of the property. That's where he's going to bed somewhere over there, and then he's going to come back more than likely in the afternoon and do it again, or do some kind of a loop. You know, he's in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the.
And bucks do loop. They do loops. Like if you.
I think most of them loop. It's just how big the loop. Like I think in the big woods country, it's way bigger than I thought.
Agreed.
Like, and so he may hit it and he may do the loop, but he ain't making it back in daylight.
Could also be a line. You know what I mean? Like they don't. Maybe it's not always a loop, but
yeah.
I don't know, man. The big ones are weird. They do weird stuff.
I don't think that they want to make big loops, though. I don't think they want to move a lot. The big ones, they don't want. They don't want to burn energy like that if they don't have to.
No, and you're, you know, again, the areas that you're in, it's amazing. People say, well, they're just a goat, or the deer do what deer do, and I just don't believe in that, because the more places that I hunt, I mean, there's so many factors that cause them to do what they do. You take, like, again, I'm kind of sandwiched in the middle of, you know, a Midwestern / Southern type rut. So where you have a pretty defined rut in the Midwest, where it's kind of boxed into that, you know, October the 30th, November 1st through like the 17th, 18th, somewhere in there. You know, in Texas, you definitely get that. And it does increase. The activity does increase, but it's such a trickle after that for us. You know, it's not defined. And so what you end up having is around Thanksgiving, December, all the way up through Christmas, you've got your bucks, to use a Rendell Eric term, long lining, you know, to these does on different places, unlike anywhere else I've ever hunted. I mean, they may go 2 or 3 miles looking for, if you don't have a healthy herd where you don't have the yearling does. Like I own a farm that the week before Christmas is the absolute best rutting activity of the year. And it's because I have a healthy herd there where those yearlings are coming in.
Yep.
And it's on fire.
What is if you were to say, hey, like here's the week, 2 week window of like, what is the normal rut time where you're at in Texas, Mike?
Same as Midwest.
Okay.
Same thing.
Like first
same
2 weeks of
thing.
November.
Yep. But the difference is again, we have, and I mean, Jeremy knows the biology of it a lot better than I would, but we have such mild temperatures here that, a fawn can be born at any time, and survive. Like we never, I mean, if we get 3 days under 20 degrees, like that's a lot.
Yeah.
Like we just don't get those type temperatures. So we don't have that environmental effect on our herd. And so our rut is just so spread out. And like I said, you've got them coming in. And as long as you have, even though it's a smaller percentage, obviously, as long as you have does coming in, bucks are going to be, especially the mature ones, they're going to be going to where they are. They know them, They know them like a phone book.
HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Spartan Forge.
Dude, maps. Mapping, right?
Yeah.
It all starts with a map, a visualization of a new property, into the fine tuning of different food plots, different habitat projects, where those are going to go, all the way to sharing pins and looking kind of like beyond the layers with something like a LiDAR, which is exclusive to Spartan Forge as of now.
Yeah, and whether we're looking at it from a management side to put in food plots or switchgrass, or if we're taking a run and gun public approach on Kansas, it all starts with a map. It starts with a strategy there. You and I are going to have our own Blue Force team, which will allow us to run our own devices, but be able to see what you're adding or what I'm adding to that single map, which is really going to be critical moving forward this hunting season.
That's right. So if you're looking for a mapping software to try out this year, or maybe you're just like not getting what you need out of the one you're using currently, Bill's offered us a promo code of HUNTR20, HUNTR20, that you guys can use to get your own subscription up and rolling. Check out Spartan Forge, download the app, use that promo code, and we'll be using that this year.
Make sure you check out Spartan Forge.
Boy, it's getting late on our end, to see that,
Yeah.
It did seem like it. I mean, I haven't been in the woods as much, but it did seem like December 1. It kind of like.
Well, I mean, if you had if you've got a really high doe to buck ratio, right? If it's 3-4 does per buck, there's a good chance that some of those does were missed in estrus, which means 28 days later, which is the cycle, we're there right now. Like it would, at least in our, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, like it would be right now that those missed cycle does would be coming back into estrus between now and the 10th, right? Give or take. And then usually to Mick's point about those young ones coming in the healthy herd aspect of things, end of December into mid-January, like that 3-week time frame is when you see any of those doe fawns potentially cycle in. Could be later than that, but usually it's still in that optimum time frame of trying to happen, before mid-January in the Midwest, Northeast time frame.
Have you seen in Ohio or Kentucky any like revitalization of rut scrape stuff here like in the past week?
I haven't yet, but I would expect it to happen in the next like 5 to 6 days. And it would be for missed does. Now in Kentucky, I don't expect to see it because I have very few deer. Like I don't think that any of those does. I am waiting for some of those fawns to come in, and around Christmas that will happen.
Yeah.
But in Ohio, I've got a lot of does there, and I would expect some of those to have probably gotten missed. So in the next 5 to 7 days, I expect possibly to see some chase in, or even a buck locked down with a doe at some point.
I have definitely seen less of that as we have shot more does over the years.
What you would think you would see.
We do see it kind of wrap up a little earlier. I can remember years like 5 years ago, it would be like the very end of season. It'd be like, be like mid to end of January. I'd be hunting a bean field and I'd see a chase like on the hillside. And I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing bucks chasing does in March and when growing out outside of Pittsburgh and stuff, because there's just so many freaking does there,
When did we see that buck chasing that doe in
March.
Illinois? Was it March?
Yeah. Was in
Yeah,
March.
it was the weirdest thing. It was a shed buck.
Just freaking dogging her, man.
Yeah,
just dogging her, like panting. Like he was like, "What? I'm back in the game."
That was bizarre.
Yeah.
You know, the reality of it is, you know, that's where cameras can be the most deadly, is if you can put some history together on a property and you can find those herds that come in those very defined time frames. Like, again, that one farm I have the week before Christmas, you know, again, you know where to be for that certain time frame on that farm. And, you know, that's much more predictable than getting a picture of a deer on a corn pile or a feeder or something like that, or even a food plot. Like, they're going to do that. The biggest, most mature buck on that farm will be daylight in that spot, one of those or multiple of those 5 or 6 days.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's the kind of stuff that I think.
Sorry, real quick. Is that because you think of the doe groups coming into estrus at a certain time? Is that what you're attributing that to?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain. I mean, again, you know, it's hard to tell individual does, but you know, assuming that you're not just smacking the does or your neighbors aren't smacking the does, there's certain ones, especially the early ones. Like, you know, I've mentioned here, I've got a doe that, whatever, October 27th or 28th, I can pretty much guarantee she's going into estrus back here behind my house. And I mean, it's the first hardcore chase. I see new bucks show up, like it's on.
I saw GR8 breeding a doe on.
It was early.
I can look back at the date, but
19th or 20th, something like that.
Yeah, it was right in there of October.
Yeah, it was early. And I would bank on, if that doe survives, she'll do it again next year, same time.
And we see that a lot. I just, you know, it's really interesting because it's like we've talked about, there isn't that chase on the mature buck side of things in the first rut. No, it just doesn't seem like it. They come together, and you know, you're fortunate to see, you know, catch any glimpse of them or whatever, but it's not, and once that happens, it's kind of like good luck, you know.
Yeah, now you're in it
until it starts to dry up, and then he's going to start surfacing a bit, you know, as he's looking for.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's on the analytical side again. You know, the volume of doe that are in heat or coming into heat is what, you know, suppresses the urgency, I guess, for the mature buck. But there towards the end, when he knows that those yearlings and stuff, he knows it's limited at that point, you know, and there's going to be less doe coming in than there is bucks, and they're going to be all over that area.
Dude, go with me in your minds for a second. Dude, there are a few days, there's usually only like one or maybe two, like at the end of October, like the 20th through the, you know, and they're not necessarily like cold days, but there's almost like a haze to them, and they seem to have like some sort of a smell in the, it's not like estrus, like you're smelling estrus.
You're on the edge though.
But it's just like, you're just like, oh boy, like, you
it's
know,
about to go.
You just, it's like almost there's tension in here, and then and then you might catch a glimpse of like, oh, there's one like ripping through the cornfield. He's got one locked down over there, type of a thing. Or you just see this burst of like rut activity. It's like for the first time of the year.
Yep, and you're in it.
I almost forgot about that. I almost forget about him every year, but then I was like, oh yeah.
And then it happens again.
I had that hunt.
It'll happen again.
Yeah.
Next year.
Yeah, well, I you know, I don't see some of the biggest bucks, you know, I just don't see them running doe very often. Some of the biggest bucks I've killed, you know, they're not killed that way.
I've never seen one. I've never seen one running a doe. I've seen them, you know, follow.
Well,
never seen a big one running a doe?
I've never seen a 5-year-old or older buck chasing a doe.
I saw that 180 in Iowa doing it. The Santa Claus.
Chasing her or running other bucks off?
No, chasing her, like hard on her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he was guarding her in the river ditch. He went into the ditch. They both came out, I mean, at full speed going. Like, I mean,
Am I misremembering? Is there a fight? I've seen 4-year-olds doing it.
I mean, that was, I assume that deer was at least 5 and he was hauling.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were in the next zip code in, 5 minutes.
Well, I think sometimes, and this is a deep rabbit hole, and I don't know that there's a real answer, but, we talk about 1% bucks, everything has to be right, environmentally, everything for them to do what they do as far as reach their potential. And let's go back to the drop tine buck. I had 4 years of information that I was able to dig up on that buck. And with, having 4 drops, big drops, you think about it and being in the part of the country he was in and the body sizes, you go, why in the world did that deer never hardly break an antler or a tine? Never. Like, even when he shed and made it through the seasons, because I found someone with his sheds from a prior year, how in the world did that deer with, 15-inch twos and, 11-inch drop, how did he not break those if he's rutting so hard and pushing
Right.
up against other bucks and things? And I just believe, it takes a very passive personality of a deer and a unique situation where he didn't run himself down during the rut, his whole life. And everything lined up for him to be able to do that. Because obviously, if he's not doing that, he probably has a pretty low stress level.
Mm-hmm.
Just all that stuff played into it. So when you look at that and you say, well, is that personality a real thing in producing mega bucks, 1% bucks? And if that is the case, it's not going to be the buck that's ripping on does for 3 years.
No.
Because he's probably not going to be alive, number one. Number two, he's going to run himself, down.
Yeah. I think that there's also, I think when you talk about that October time period, mid-October to the end of October, that shuffling of the hierarchy is where a deer like that I think he just asserts his dominance. And I think that some of the other bucks, even with testosterone's rising, they just kind of accept it. They're like, hey, there's going to be other does to go after type of thing. Like it's not worth messing with him. And I don't think to your point, Mick, I don't think he can achieve that 1% of antler quality if he is out there fighting and running his ass into the ground, right? There's no way. I mean, it takes effort, it takes energy, which takes resources away from that deer, and he has to use those resources to repair his body before he can start growing antlers the next year.
Right. Yep.
They definitely know. Yep. I mean, you can see when the other deer see one. You know what I mean? They know. They know who's who. And I mean, who knows if he literally, but I doubt it, if he went and literally kicked all of their butts, and probably not.
No.
They probably are just like us.
It's like, dude,
if some dude we didn't know walked into our room, not just because that would be weird, but you know what I mean? Like, just like in any environment, if we see a dude who's big, like a big dude or whatever, and we just be like, oh, well, yeah, hey,
man,
yeah, good for you, good for you, man,
good for you,
yeah. We wouldn't mess with them, right? You know what I mean? It's like there's something about their body language.
It's a stature thing. Versus, frankly, I mean, think of like the bully 5-year-old bucks that you think about. Those deer they're big bodies, but they usually have small antlers because they're just out there just trying to fight everybody that they see.
Yeah.
And they burn a ton of energy.
Those little ones are probably just like, oh, hey, dude, hey, they found this doe for you.
Yeah, here you go.
Here, this one.
I was bringing her over. I was bringing her
right over, man.
Yeah.
Well, we talk about them being run down, and I mentioned this to Jared before we got on, but, we had 26 days in November in this area over average temperature. So it may have been the warmest November I ever remember.
Wow.
And you look at the bucks that we had pictures of in October that are 5 or 6 year olds. And right now, like if you didn't know any different, you would think they were 3-year-olds. Like they are tiny. And I've never seen them lose the top body weight that they've lost this year. And so we know that the rut didn't stop. We know that they chased, and they did during the month of November, but those mild temperatures really showed like what it does to them.
Just melted
because
it off
we don't,
them.
They don't bulk up here for the winter, because they don't have a hard winter coming. So it is crazy how much they lost, and they're going to have to put that back on.
Wow.
So you have to believe that that's going to take some of, their growth potential.
Do you guys have much luck on, I mean, imagine on public land, you can't go in and place a water hole or anything like that. But I mean, is water a very big factor for you guys?
No. And here's the thing, in Texas, I say this all the time. It's one of the dangers of hunting out of state is, you have to understand the regulations, and it's spooky because everyone has the same general rules, but they're defined differently. So baiting in the state of Texas on public land is corn. It is throw and grow. Say you throw seed on the ground in a draw and it comes up and they can prove that you did it. That's baiting.
Wow.
If you dam up or take a shovel and you dig a hole.
No.
And
you
dig a
do it
hole
on your place. It's a food plot.
Yeah.
On public land,
if you put a liner in or something, that water is considered baiting. So, it's one of the things that makes public land great is you don't have those outside influences of all those different things going on. And again, because it's not a competitive or any area really, if you're not in a competitive area where people can still get access to stuff, why would they go and rough it in their minds on land like that when they can go put out a feeder and a pond and whatever they want to on private land?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess
doesn't it sound very similar to Pennsylvania, like Texas?
Yeah, it does.
Like we have these giant swaths of public land, and I could be wrong. I mean, that's where a lot of the big deer in Pennsylvania get killed, right? Is public land?
No.
More than private?
No, I mean, they're killing most of them on private, but they are starting to kill more on public because it's just vast land with less hunting pressure than it used to.
What types of properties in Pennsylvania do you think, and you can reciprocate and see how this matches to Texas, what types of properties in Pennsylvania do you think most of these big deer are getting killed on? And I'll preface that because I would think the parcel side would be a challenge for, like, if they're getting killed on private land. It seems like
they're still getting killed on big farmland, with good soil that has crops and stuff.
What parts of the state?
A lot of central PA. That's where the best farmland is.
And the bigger parcels too.
Yep, bigger parcels. But we're killing more in urban areas like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Harrisburg, and those areas are getting bigger because they're just getting
urban
age.
Deer though, it's just
they're getting age, and then the tier, which would be the big woods deer. There's not as many of them, but they are killing bigger and bigger bucks up there because they're getting older.
Sure. Yeah.
Yep, those are your big ones. But most of them are coming. If you look at most of the big bucks, they're coming out of farm country, better soil country in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
So do you guys is it similar?
Yeah, it's very similar, but one of the big differences is, the best ground, in my opinion, for production is public here.
Production of deer?
Where private is not.
Production of deer?
Yes.
Because of how big it is.
Well, those are factors that play into it as well, but I believe in the dirt, in some of these areas and what it's producing.
Oh, really? Like just a stark difference in like the soil type?
Yeah, like for instance, let's just say that quality farm ground in Pennsylvania was public and the mountainous areas that is public was farm ground, or not farm ground, but private.
Yep.
It would be the opposite. Like public would be the best. Oh. So the difference is that the better ground tends to be public, and there's a lot of different factors behind that, but a lot of which is the small parcel thing combined with liberal gun seasons and baiting is a death sentence for quality.
Well, and that's why I was kind of asking the question is like, it surprises me, I guess, to hear that some of those bigger deer are coming off of private land as opposed to public because of the smaller parcel size. But I guess we have a diverse state, the middle part of Pennsylvania is bigger.
Yeah, and it's just those blocks of timber.
Obviously, Texas is diverse too. But
blocks of timber that they're living in, surrounded by big ag. Like they're kind of isolated on their own island type of thing. So they are smaller parcels, but they're not as vulnerable as like, there's 5 guys, almost in Ohio, where you've got 5 guys stacked here, 5 guys stacked here, 5 guys stacked here.
Mick, we have... Correct me if I'm wrong on this. Does Pennsylvania have the most hunters of any state?
No, I think Texas does.
Texas does. And then Pennsylvania.
Yep. Correct.
Yeah. And not by a big margin?
I don't know. I don't know where you're at now in Texas. You're north of 1 million still?
Yeah. We have, you got to think our population's somewhere around 29 million, I think.
And growing.
In the state of Texas. Oh, yeah. And growing. But it's super hard. We don't have good data like some of the states. Because we don't have a check system.
Really?
We have,
No check system?
No, and we have something called a super combo. So for $68, you buy a super combo and you get everything. So you get your fishing license, you get your hunting license, your archery tag is lumped in there. So we don't really know how many archers are in the state.
Damn.
We don't know how many gun hunters are in the state. We don't know that information. We don't have it dialed in the way some of the other states do.
Wow.
Nick, just for fun, here's what it says. Texas in 2024 had the highest number of hunting licenses, tags, permits, and stamps issued in the United States with over 1.1 million.
Yep, sounds right.
And Pennsylvania had 953,903.
Wow, that's higher than I thought. I thought we were in the 700s.
7.4% of the states. So, I mean, that's honestly, it's pretty close. And think about like the geographical difference in size of Pennsylvania to Texas. That gives you an idea how many hunters we have.
We're stacked in here. Sardines.
Yeah. Well, what did Skip Sly say on that podcast? Find a new farm.
Yeah.
Find a new farm. Yeah.
Find a new farm.
You know what I was thinking about?
It's not working. Find a new farm.
You know what I was thinking about earlier, dude? You could find one. Oh, you know what? No, I did. I was gonna say I've never killed a buck in Pennsylvania, but the very first one.
Yeah, we talked
was
about
the
it.
only. I think that's the only one.
Really?
I think that's the only buck I've ever killed here.
Wow.
A 2-year-old when I was 16.
I'll say this, and not like everybody's gonna flock here. I do think that there are some areas where if you have the right farm, you could grow as good a deer in Pennsylvania as most of the other states right now.
Oh, sure.
Just the age structure is getting there finally. I mean, I just being like there's a Hunting Pennsylvania or PA Whitetail or some of the ones hunting PA Rut Report or like the Facebook groups I'm on. Dude, I couldn't believe the number, and I don't know for sure, right? I'm basing it off of guys just doing like hero shots. Couldn't believe the number of what I would assume are 4 and 5 year old bucks being killed in Pennsylvania right now. Yeah. Like a pile of them. Multiple deer, well over 50s and 60s. Several deer that are probably like there was one I think up towards I think 1A is Erie, like mid 80s easily.
Wow.
Kevin Marrow just sent me one that the Amish killed by him, mid 80s.
Wow.
Like monsters. And it's just because they're finally getting age. We've had the soil and we've had the genetics forever. It's just we killed them at 1 year old. They all died at 1.5. Now all of a sudden you're getting them to 3, 4, 5.
We're in a weird kind of vacuum here too. Like the Pittsburgh area is so different. I feel like from the whole rest of the state. Like, and we're really not far. Yeah, it's a giant. That's up north.
That's
close to Kevin's.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow,
mega.
Yeah, I'm only a half an hour from Pittsburgh. And where we record a studio here is maybe an hour. And it's you, Jeremy, right here are on the fringe because you get the mountain to the south and stuff. But like where I'm at in the Pittsburgh suburb area, like it's suburb. Like not even suburb. It's just there's houses everywhere. Every bit of dirt has been disturbed, like whether it's overpasses or it has that feel.
Strip mine areas.
To it. Well, down here strip mine and stuff, but you don't have to go that far outside. 45 minutes to an hour in any direction, you can start getting into like, oh, there's actually some pretty vast country out here. There's some bigger, even farm ground and stuff like that. So maybe our Pennsylvania experience, mine anyways, is kind of like in a vacuum. And if I head anywhere, I'm heading west.
Central PA looks like the Midwest. It's just big, giant ag, except you've got big ridges on both sides that are big timber ridges above the river valleys and stuff.
And I'm like, I've been through there like 10 times my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what, soil, it's selling for $25,000 an acre out there too.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Nuts. So, yeah, I think it is. Throw out the, the lower coastal plains of Mississippi and the, in Florida and stuff. I would say in most areas, like if you could get bucks to 5 years old, like you've got a lot of chance to get those deer into that 140 to 150 class pretty easily.
Yeah.
If you in most of the country, if you could get them to 5 years old, like if you're like actually getting a herd to like decent age structure, you got the chance of growing 160s anywhere.
Yeah. The biggest issue is, how do you get the masses of hunters to understand, age structure? Because I have some really close buddies. I had a couple guys in this past weekend hunting from other states with me. And, you know, we go back and forth. They say, "Oh, Mick, you think everything's 4.5." And I go, yeah, a lot of them are. And, I almost think very few are 5.5 and 6.5, depending on where we are. But, you know, like the buck that I killed 2 weeks ago, I had him at 3, I had him at 4, I had him at 5, and I had him at 6.5. And I have his sheds from 2 of those years.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was 4, he had a sway back, big pot belly, big shoulders, looked awesome. And he was 138-inch 8-point. And I mean, if you didn't know the buck, you would have been like, "Oh, he's a shooter for sure." Well, the next year he's a mid-50s, 5.5-year-old. And yeah, he's a shooter at this point, but I didn't know he was alive. And I tagged out in that county before I found out. So I couldn't hunt him last year. And then this year I get in there early as a 6.5-year-old, and he went from 100 and mid-50s 9-point to 167-inch 13-point.
Wow.
And I mean, that just goes to show you, like,
Yeah.
And around where we are, people shoot that deer as a 138-inch 4-year-old, and they call him 6.
Yep.
So,
yeah, exactly.
You know, the only thing that can protect that is regulations. And obviously, with, you know, you guys know from having Mike Rex and some of the other DNR guys on, you know, it's an uphill battle for quality to be at the top of the priority list.
Yeah, always is. And I you know, we understand the balance of opportunity, right? We don't want, in fact, that's why we do it. That's the hard part for, I think, people that don't see our point of view to understand, is like, when we're having these discussions, it's because we see a lot of the quote opportunities being put in play, limiting access because there's more opportunity, right? The more opportunity somebody has, the more time they have to do it, the more they secure things like land leases or land to buy, which chokes other people out from an access standpoint. So the reason we have these discussions about, like, hey, there needs to be restrictions, we need to watch this, is because those over opportunities or over liberalizations are what are creating what we believe is the biggest problem in hunting, which is access.
Yep.
It is the conservation mindset. I mean, I think people get rubbed the wrong way. And I do too, to think about like the government regulating anything. I'm like, no, at face value, no, I don't want that. But, you know, conservation is restricting yourself from over harvest, you know what I mean, for the quality of the resource. And so, like,
and people can't do it. People can't
not
restrict
coordinated.
themselves.
We're not, we can't restrict ourselves, you know, on a mass scale. So like, it has to be done by a body, you know?
Yep. Somebody has to put the rules in place.
Yeah.
Well, and access, just so you guys know, I mean, on the manufacturing side of the industry, you know, in the future of it, I mean, that's one of the biggest conversations that we talk about is, you know, loss of access and what that's doing to hunter numbers and different things like that. So it is a real discussion. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's going to continue to be the biggest discussion. It's why, you know, people say, well, this, you know, hunting's for the rich now. It's not that. It's that this liberalization and the increase of opportunities has allowed more people to spend more time there. Therefore, they're going to spend more money on it. Like that, it's a natural progression. And if it doesn't stop, then yeah, it will create a really odd situation where we're going to have like a very limited amount of access. Basically, the only people with access have leases or own land. And at the same time, we're seeing this weird kind of decline in the quality of the deer herd. So it's costing me more to do what I love to do. And at the same time, the result is less than it's ever been.
Yep.
Mick, can I ask you, do you guys have conversations internally at Hoyt about crossbows, about making a crossbow or anything like that?
Historically they have. It's just not something that ever made sense for us. I mean, from a manufacturing standpoint, obviously, you know, from a compound, we're a compound company, and the demand that the demand
Jeremy's had as a crossbow.
The demand the demand that there is,
it's off the charts. Got to be.
Oh, it's off the charts. But you know, we have a way of doing business, and that would be a major disruptor, you know, for us. We've got to, you know, fulfill orders on compound, you know, and keep that going the right direction. And adding that is that would be a total change in business model. Mm-hmm. And I guess we've just never been ready to go down that road.
HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Pure Wildlife Blends.
Yeah, buddy. We're doing a lot of food plots this year. It seems like the planning, the preparation, like the coordinating for getting everything, in the ground is like it just never ends.
Yeah, and I just got off an 18-hour bender where I'm on multiple farms getting everything ready. But this year, fortunately, we've got Pure Wildlife Blends, which is Jeff Sturgis. Who better to partner with for our food plot program than a guy who's got 30 years of experience, been on thousands of farms. I mean, the guy lives and breathes food plots.
Yeah, and so the blends themselves are all handpicked by Jeff, and it's like, man, we've had a lot of conversations with him over the years, and he's been pretty influential on how we set up farms and stuff. And frankly, the product, it's in the name, it's Pure Wildlife Blend. So a lot of these other seeds that you see that are blue and orange and all these things, it's because they're coated with lime and they're dyed, and it's marketing at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of confidence in the seeds that Jeff has chose, and that's what we're going to be planting this year. And so right now, you can use code HUNTR10 for 10% off anything on the website.
So if you're looking for switch, clover, brassica, or Jeff's favorite, layer in the rye.
Layer in the rye.
Yep, check out purewildlifeblends.com.
Do you see? I guess Matthews is the only one that comes to mind. That I guess it's their sister company. Is it Mission or what's Matthews? Crossbow?
Yeah, Mission.
Yeah, they've got
Crossbows.
Mission.
And then are there other bow companies that have gotten into the crossbow space?
Yeah, originally Bowtech was the first one.
Really?
I can't remember their original one, but yeah, they had like the Striker series and things like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. I can see how it seems like it would be a major temptation. Like if I was in the shoes of a just a bow manufacturer, it's like look at just the space. Look at the demographic in the space. It's like you have 70% in Ohio anyway. 70% of the archery harvest is crossbows. So there's obviously a major market there.
Well, it's like the tree stand market. It's I think 70 or 80% of the tree stand market is now ladder stands.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of it is, I mean, when you throw numbers out like that, I think the national average of success rate on compound was 26%. And I think a lot of the tags and states were set up that way. The national average now for archery with crossbow is 42% is the numbers that I've been given. So that's why you see those big harvest numbers, is because it's literally almost twice as potent, as far as a kill rate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. I had not heard that. In fact,
that would make sense.
I guess it was probably Mike Rex or Tonkovich that told us, again, this is an Ohio reference, but they basically said there has been no difference in the
total
and harvest number. Yeah, even though you have a lot more
70%
people participating in the archery season.
70% of the archery harvest is crossbow in Ohio.
Yeah, well, what they're saying is a lot of them have shifted.
Yeah, they haven't added.
But they haven't added.
Yeah, they've shifted. Pennsylvania is 50-50.
50-50.
But I would assume that the archery harvest has increased in the state of Pennsylvania. I don't think that there's no way that it hasn't.
Yeah, but you got to think Ohio is and I may have this wrong, but Ohio is literally one of the first states that were legalized. So it's like all the new innovations in the industry between cameras and all those things, crossbows were right on the heels of all of that. So,
right.
It's a hard look when you look at a state that maybe only been open 10 years versus one like Ohio that's been open for, I don't even know how long as I remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah. A long time. I don't know if they were ever illegal or, how that
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it was just like you had that Excalibur originally that was kind of like, that was the crossbow.
Was it?
That
was the first one?
I don't know if that was the first. That's the only one. That's the furthest one back I remember is like the Excalibur, like, recurved limb crossbow.
Yeah.
And just the only thing I remember is guys had to have a medical excuse to use one. Uh-huh. And most guys never wanted to do it because they look like a wuss.
Yeah.
Still do.
Until very recently. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Until very recently. And what's the other one? 10 Point was the other one that maybe rings a bell.
That may have been one of the first compound ones, like with wheels or cams.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was curious how internally at Hoyt, you guys looked at that situation. And
Jared's thinking about crossing over.
Yeah.
To female.
I'm going to convert.
Yeah. No, that, like I said, they had discussions, but like I said, as an elite bow company, we do what we do really well, and we wanted to stay in that lane.
Yeah, be a good April Fool's joke.
Yeah, the Hoyt crossbow.
Yeah. For all those trans archers out there.
Yeah, we get asked about it, so. Yeah.
I bet you do. When are you guys coming out with a crossbow? I'd love to get me
Not
one.
as much as we used to,
From dealers?
But, yeah, dealers, consumers, all the way around. Yep.
I mean,
it's a very viable category.
Oh,
And
I mean, I'm sure it's a monster.
It's extremely important to our industry at this point.
Yeah.
And for our dealers to be healthy, no different than, one bow brand, can't run the whole industry. We need healthy competitors, and
sure.
It's just for the best of the industry.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think about on the crossbow side, I mean, the amount of bolts that sells and broadheads that sells and, fletchings and lighted nocks and probably tree stands, like everything else. I mean, it's a domino effect on the amount. And that, again, I'm not saying in a negative way, but that's what the opportunity it creates those guys to spend more money than they would have if they were a 5-day gun hunter. Right? If they were a 5-day gun hunter, they have bullets, they have their gun, they probably wear the same orange that they've worn for 30 years. Now with more seasoned,
which is great.
Yeah, it's more money into the local economy. It's more money into the industry aspect of things. But it's as long as the resource can remain healthy and support what's happening there, and the access is not limiting people who frankly don't have the funds to go out there and lease a property at $50 an acre or whatever.
Yeah. It's not one thing that's doing it. It's the combination of some, and any of those that's pulled back on would help.
It would.
Like I said again, if I'm not saying I'm for or against, but cause reaction. If Kansas was to follow through with their bait ban, then that state changes immediately.
Yeah,
immediately. Like, it doesn't matter what Crossbows are doing or anything else.
Nope, immediately.
Yep. So there's a lot of things, and I don't think it's far fetched. I mean, I hear discussions about those type things all the time as far as doing better, and I think platforms like what you guys have and the conversations and this and that. I think we're literally just a vote or an election or an appointment away from the right people being in the right places in some of these states.
Yeah.
And the ball gets rolling.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that a lot of the people in the right positions, frankly, are not at the top. Therefore, even if they go for it, they stick their neck out, their head gets cut off. And that, we've had several conversations with people who are in those positions where it's like, okay, they could get the ball rolling, but ultimately they can't make the final decision. It's going to come from above. We told them straight up, dude, we'll be the tip of the arrow here. Like, put us out in front, let us plow the way. That said, they still know that eventually it rolls back to them and they could lose their head in it. And I mean, for some of these guys, it's their families, it's their livelihood. They can't.
Yeah. And I think you need to understand, we're the minority.
Oh, for sure.
Us three and the people like us, we're the minority, in it, and I have to be careful. I walk into stores where there's, our customer is in there, and some of those guys, if it's brown, it's down, and if you speak out against that, they'll attack you. And there's a lot of those guys. So that's what I say is so great about hunting is stylistically, it's different for everyone. You can do it your own way, your style, whether you do it with a gun, whether you do it with a bow, whether you do it with a crossbow, whether you do it in late season, early season. And wherever you find that freedom, and I'm using a Hoyt tagline. That was our tagline last year. But, this is freedom. It really is. Like, for a lot of people, that bow to them is like Wilson on Castaway.
Oh, yeah.
When Tom Hanks had the ball. You get in a tree, you take that with you. It's probably the only thing other than a release you take with you, and it's the face of your hunt sitting in the tree with you.
Yeah.
And you're finding a freedom and an escape from life, with an escape from maybe any problems you may have or anything like that. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked by a lot of people, and that's what's going to sustain is the industry and hunting is people understanding that side of it is, man, that's where I can go to be in the quiet. That's where I can go, to escape the baseball drama that I do with my kid or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to say it. And I feel like the reason that it's such a, it's a challenging conversation to have, like with a lot of our listeners and people who would, be opposed to things like, me saying, hey, we should ban this or that, is I'm sure they feel like I'm wanting to impose on their freedom, or just even the idea of like, hey, take this away, take that away, would be imposing on that freedom, when the reality is not. It could be further from the truth. Like, and I've never tried to tell anybody how to hunt or how they should do it, as I really can't. If it's legal, what am I gonna say? Like, hey, just put yourself at a disadvantage and don't use all the tools at your disposal. Like, it would be stupid. Like, there's no argument to do that.
Well, and I understand. You and I come from the same place. It's not to eliminate freedom. It's to create opportunity,
Right.
which would be freedom. Like, we understand on this level that, if
well, and because of that,
Nick,
the gripe is with the managing body. It's not with the people who are executing on the rules that they've been given. That's great.
Right.
You use the freedom to your extent, but like behind the scenes, like there is a real resource here that needs to be managed. And
it needs to be protected.
I'm not saying it's all of our responsibilities to like. And maybe you have to abide by the rules and stuff, but it's not, somebody has to set the rules, to manage the resource.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll tell you that and we don't have to go into this, but I just want to make this comment, but the disease discussion in combination with the kills or the killing every year, I think that's something that, as it becomes more prevalent, like EHD and CW, they've got to pay attention to like some of these areas that are, getting decimated and go, we need to pull back. They need to leave. I think they need to be a little more hands-on, just saying, look, it's just not in the cards this year in zone 4 or in zone 5.
You got to be a little bit more reactive to this stuff.
Well, that's right. I mean, and you have to have a way to figure those things out, but if they don't, you're going to end up in a bad place. I mean,
I don't know how much they need to have like a way to, it's pretty clear. Like if you go into some of these areas, whether it's like, hey, we just found 1,000 dead deer from EHD. Well, the number is probably 8 to 10 times that actually died.
That's right.
Clear observation that like we need to pull back a little bit here. Like I saw Skip posting his stuff in Iowa where he's like, listen, man, some of these areas, there are no deer left. Like we are, and this is Iowa, like one of the most protected states, out there. And it's like, I had no idea. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, we're between the EHD and just people just going out there and seeing, not seeing a ton of deer. So they just shoot a doe. Like it is starting to add up and make an impact. And it's like,
and so if their quotas and their attention they're given to it is accurate, then losing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 deer, and then, allowing for the same harvest rate.
Yep. I think it doesn't
work.
No.
And we've seen it a couple, 2 or 3 years in a row, and specifically that state. And I'm telling you, Kansas too. You hear it out of Iowa, but a lot of it doesn't get talked about in Kansas. Like, there's some areas of Kansas that are getting crushed. And I mean, specifically the area that I spend a lot of time in,
yep.
I can see the difference. I mean, and it happened fast.
Yep.
And there's no way that it happened by hunters.
No. And that's the stuff that, and unfortunately, like, on the biologist side of me doesn't blame them, but the hunter side does, in that it's like, they'll say, hey, well, we're going to just collect data for the next 3 years. Well, shit, man, a lot can happen in 3 years before you decide to make a decision on what you need to do here.
Yep.
So those are the things that I do. I know things move slow. It's the government, right? It's political. But in this resource atmosphere side of things, you've got to be reactive, because we've seen it. At least like if we take the Midwest side, like look at Ohio. We had the perfect temperatures on opening day. It was a record harvest, the most they've ever killed in 12 years. Like if we had gotten hit with EHD and still had that weather, boy, the herd would be hurting. Be freaking hurting bad right now. Mm-hmm. And so like those things happen. Like if it rained for the entire week of gun season, wouldn't be near the harvest, and we wouldn't have to worry about anything. But if you don't react to those things, you can't predict what's going to happen on opening day or for the week or whatever it might be. So those types of things happening are more and more to me, alarming from a state level. And Illinois' one, I've reached out to Illinois. Maybe they listen. I've reached out to Illinois' deer biologist to come on. For whatever reason, they are like within 5% of total harvest every year for like the last 10 years. Like there's a 5% variance. I don't think that's mathematically possible.
Why not?
Well, think about if it's 3-day season, it rains all weekend. How the hell are they still within 5%?
Yeah. Jared, just look at Missouri this year. You know, I think, and I won't get the number exactly right, but 2 years ago, the first week of gun season, it was like 90-something thousand antlered bucks were shot.
Yep.
This year, they lost a third of that.
Yeah.
Like it was horrible weather.
Horrible weather.
I don't know, 60,000.
They were down 26 or 27%, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What is I was going to say, what is the standard variation like of
I mean, I would assume it's a few
nationwide.
percent.
A few percent.
Yeah, depending. But I mean, a weather change, especially when you're talking about opening weekend or in Illinois, it's a 3-day season for the first season.
Well, yeah, I guess they haven't released this year's numbers yet.
I think they did. I don't know. I'm not sure if they have.
So in the short time that we've been there, I would guess that last year was probably a big spike.
It wasn't.
In harvest.
It was within 5%.
But I'm saying in real life. Like in reality.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was early. It was the earliest it will ever be. It was perfect weather for rutting activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounded like a war zone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But the numbers, Brick shot a guy. The numbers were within 5% of the average.
Interesting.
I think a lot of that is the modeling and the way things are reported. And like, it's kind of like if you only get 10% of the data and I have to predict 90%, sure, it's always going to be within a small variance versus if I get 90% of the data and I only have to predict 10.
It is a little scary, Mick, when you start learning like how some of these states collect their information and evidence and stuff. It's like, oh.
Well, I mean, Mick just said you guys don't even have a check system. How the hell do you guys know how many deer you kill?
No, and we have a new system this year where you actually just, well, it's done off of an app. You know, you walk up to the deer and, you know, you get a piece of duct tape out and write the number on it, confirmation number, and wrap it around its antlers and hit the button, harvest, spits out a number, and that's it.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. I mean, anything's better than whatever app. I think apps are great. Everybody's got their phone, and that's a good way to keep track
when
of
Pennsylvania
it.
used to do the
you're just saying.
system.
I mean, we don't tell them what it is or anything like that, other than the fact that it's a whitetail buck.
Oh.
You know.
Yeah, I
so
guess
you
that's
don't
kind of
really
a missed opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, tell me how many points it has.
You do. It has to be fairly limited because I mean that. You know, that's probably better done. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I was
going to say it's better done in a follow-up survey, but how many people really answer those, you know?
So, Mick, you have is it a 13-inch beam or 13-inch spread restriction?
13-inch spread restriction, which,
that's advanced for whitetail deer hunters.
That's technical.
Yeah, it is. But the thing is, and
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, you go talk to guys at the store, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "Man, ever since they did that, we're seeing a lot better bucks." And I make the argument that it's not good because again, you take the average hunter, especially down here, and hunting is very, very, very difficult here. There's a lot of odds stacked against you with the terrain, with the hogs, with all kind of stuff. So buck sightings, and I leave the word big off of that. Buck sightings in general are very limited. And when someone sees a buck, like they may have hunted 3 years without seeing 2 bucks. And if it's 13 inches wide, they're killing it. They don't care if it's 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter. So we're incentivizing young deer, our best young genetics, to be killed. All the while, a junk 8-point can walk out that's 5 years old, and he goes, "Ooh, I don't know if that's 13 inches," and they pass him up.
Right.
We have no cull plan in place, and we incentivize the harvest of superstars.
Wow.
And I don't look at it like the deer's, 13 inches wide. If you shoot a 16-inch wide 2-year-old, I look at that like, what was he at 5? That's what we just took out of the herd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, antler restrictions.
Is there also a point restriction in Texas or just the spread?
No, just spread.
Do you think the 2 in tandem would be more effective?
Yes. I think instead of having, again, you've got 3 buck tags that so long as they're shot in different counties, you can kill 3 trophies. And instead of having 3 trophies, potentially just have 2 tags, one of which is a cull tag. You know,
something that's under that.
Those would be easy to stack. Like, and I guess, I don't know, it's easy to just say something, but to totally think it through, like, it seems like Pennsylvania would also benefit from having both. Like, whatever we have here, a 3 high rule and a spread rule.
We looked at this in Mississippi State a lot.
Because here, Mick, guys just shoot 1-year-old 8 points. You know, it's got enough.
3 points. It really, the best one, I mean, like basal circumference or something would be the best, but the best one would be beam length, right? Because think of like a stud 5-year-old that's only 12 inches wide. He's probably going to have a 17 or 18 inch beam at least, right? Like he may be tight, but he's not going to have short beams.
That's such an exemption, though. Doesn't it seem like you should be able to write to your game warden and get an exemption for this deer?
Yeah, it should. I mean, like, to Mick's point,
here's a trail cam picture of this deer. Can you confirm this is a mature deer? Can I shoot this deer? And if they give you a written thing.
But they won't. They'll never do that. But so in theory, the beam length, but that's really hard to estimate.
Yeah, the beam's probably one of the hardest things. Like
it is.
This buck I shot. The buck I shot 2 weeks ago, and my buddies always give me a hard time, but I was telling them, like, guys, I think he's bigger than we think he is. And they said, well, how long do you think his beams are? And I'm like, well, the last shed I have, they were over 24, so looks a lot bigger than that. And so they ended up being 27 and 2/8 and 27 and 3/8.
Yeah.
And like, the point is, I mean, obviously that was obvious, but
yeah,
it's really, really difficult to judge main beam length.
Well, I mean, the big thing with antler restrictions in general. So Mississippi, and we're going to talk to the Mississippi deer biologist next week. They've got, in certain places, they've got a 10-inch spread and 13-inch main beam, and a 12-inch spread and a 15-inch main beam regulation. So as long as it's one or the other, depending on where you're at, like you could have a 12-inch inside spread or a 15-inch main beam, and it's legal. The thing with antler restrictions, though, and this is why it works in Pennsylvania, and it doesn't work, I don't think, in a state like Texas, is we just needed to protect our 1-year-olds. We killed 96% of our buck harvest was 1.5. Mm-hmm. All we wanted to do was get them to 2.5. That was the entire goal of antler restrictions. There was no goal to get them to 3. There was no goal to get them to 4. The goal was don't kill them all at 1, hopefully get them to 2. And eventually, if it catches on, people will say, well, what happens if he goes to 3? And now people are passing deer.
What do you think of this, dude? Instead of like getting into all the because that even is a little, it's like, okay, I got to train myself I'm looking at the beam specifically. But how easy is it for us to look at a deer and be like, oh, he's 140? What if you just said 100 inches or better or whatever?
No way.
No?
People couldn't do it. People can't count points.
You think they'd have a harder time?
They can't count to 3, let alone 100-inch deer. Because what happens if it's not? Like, you shoot it, it's on the ground. I'm like, it's close. You measure it, it's 98 inches.
Well, it's the same potential repercussion with any antler restriction. But what I'm saying is, like, what I'm potentially even advocating for here or arguing is, wouldn't it be easier to just know what a 100-inch deer looks like versus to say he's like got a 13-inch main beam or whatever, 13 inches wide? It would be for me.
I mean, because you use physical measurements on the deer. Like, is it as wide as his ears? For the main beam, is it past his eyeballs or is it past his nose? Like, those are the physical spots to qualify for those. I think.
I mean, if you showed me pictures of 15 deer right now, I would be a closer degree of accuracy on total score than I would be on main beam.
Well, but
length.
all you have to say is it at least 13 or 15 or 10 or 13 inches or
Well, yeah. Same with score. It's got to be over this or under this.
But I mean, how many deer have you killed with an under 15-inch main beam?
I don't know.
One or none. Not many. That's because I'm saying they're over 1. They're likely 2 or older at that point.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying is antler restrictions are only meant to protect 1-year-olds. That's all they're good for.
Though?
Because that's the easy, from a baseline level, as you get to 2, 3, and 4, there's so much variation in antlers. But at 1, it's like, how do we protect them at 1? Well, most of them have under 8 points. Great. Let's make it. Yep. This is the restriction. They have to have at least 4 points on the side.
I get it.
Or they have to have at least a 13-inch spread. Like, that protects all the 1-year-olds. I don't know why they do it in a state like Texas, honestly, because I don't think you probably had an issue with just people shooting 1-year-olds.
No, we didn't.
In Pennsylvania, we did. In Michigan, they do.
We couldn't handle it.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, there's other states that it makes sense, but in most states, I don't think it makes sense. And then if you're saying, well, let's get them to 3 instead of 2, then you're lost cause.
Well, very few of the big buck states have antler restrictions, right? Do any of them? Iowa, Illinois, even Ohio.
Missouri does in some counties.
It's starting to erode because of CWD, but they did at one point. Like when I hunted Missouri, it was a 4-point on a side restriction in all the counties I hunted. Yep.
Yeah, the other danger of that to me, and maybe this doesn't happen, but I have to believe that it does, is the person who ground checks them. You know, they get excited, they shoot them, and they're like, "Holy smokes, that's not legal." Yep. So what are they going to do? Tag it? No, they're not going to tag it. They're going to sweep it under the rug and keep hunting.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think and maybe that's just a small number, but I think that's.
It's more than I mean, I've shot deer when I was in Mississippi hunting public land. I know the first buck I shot there, I shot it, it ran off, it died. I was like, did that? Because I mean, I'm coming from a state that I had a point restriction. And then I'm like, did that have a 12-inch spread or a 15-inch beam? Shit, like I think it did. You know, you start doubting yourself, right? And I honestly, I think it was like 13 inches inside and had like a 16-inch beam. Like it wasn't like overwhelmingly like that was a big deer. Like he was probably a 2 or 3-year-old, but it was like in hindsight, I was like, holy shit! Like I started to doubt myself. Like was it a legal deer? You know, and I got up to it. First thing I did, pulled out my measuring tape to check, and I'm like, okay. It's legal.
We're good.
Yeah.
All right, I can call people.
Hey, yeah, it's a shot one.
I remember when I was a kid, it was on that Molyneux's property. There were some other guys that apparently like had permission, and I didn't know, and it was gun season, and it overlapped, and they shot, and one of the older guys in the group shot like a 1.5-year-old buck, and it ran up and died like right under my stand or whatever. And so obviously I engaged them, and my dad was there too, and like the guy thought it was a doe. You know, and because it wasn't a legal buck,
right?
And
I found a lot of dead illegal bucks the first year of antler restrictions in Pennsylvania, whatever that was, 2001 or 2. I was in high school, and I remember finding a lot of 4 and 5 points that guys shot, and they went over, and they're like, shit, and they just left.
That, and how much of that do you want to bet was people were just pissed off? Just like they're like, I'm going to buy and rip up all these doe tags. They're like, I'm just going to shoot as many 1.5-year-olds as I can.
I still think, but besides poaching and stuff, that one of the biggest misses we have in hunting right now is because of the like anti-government movement. There are a massive amount of people who are required to buy a hunting license who don't. Who are just like, forget this. Like, I'm not buying a hunting license. And it's not because they don't want to spend the money. It's purely out of rebellion against the government. That you can't tell me that I need this to go out and do hunting. Like, they just, I bet it's maybe hundreds of thousands. I'm not kidding. Hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
It's a large number.
It is hard to, sorry, go ahead, Mick.
No, I was going to say, one of the other obstacles that brought to my mind here is, he mentioned poaching and this and that is thermals, the president of thermals.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I've got a couple buddies that are game wardens, and they said, you know, it's next to impossible to catch people anymore because, you know, guys will go out and like, it's a thing here where guys go out and hunt all night and kill as many hogs because there is no limit on hogs. So unless you catch a guy with a deer and a thermal, you can't do it because they're just hog hunting. Right. And so, you know, I've seen because, you know, hogs are still relatively new in the last 20 years here. I can remember when we didn't have them at all.
Wow.
And it's changed everything. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think
that seems like maybe the worst thing that could possibly happen to a property. You know, all these other things we talk about, like just be glad we don't have
100%.
Yeah, it'll rip
dude,
it up,
dude. If you have like an acre and ridge or flat on your property, and let's just say you have 80 acres, and you know hogs move in, like they'll clean that ridge up in 3 nights, and there will be nothing left. And if you walk under those trees, and there won't be one left.
Isn't it crazy too? Because you hear a lot of people, whether it's the thermals and stuff, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm hunting." I mean, you cannot keep these hogs down. I mean, they do not. You can kill as many as you want, and they just keep coming.
You knock them down, but they get up again.
They do.
No, so
thumping.
at my old house that I just sold, the back of my property was up against a bottom, and I had hogs coming into the yard just destroying everything. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna kill these things out. So I put me a corn pile back there and put a cell phone camera on it, and I would set it, and if it sent me a message, I would wake up and I would go out there and I'd kill them at night. I mean, at night you can walk right up on them. And on the 17th night, I had to ask myself, is the joke on me? Am I just wasting? Am I just wasting bullets here?
Yeah,
because like they kept coming 17 nights in a row. And so what I ended up doing is, y'all were talking about some fences at one time. I took and I strung a 300-yard fence, open-ended, and it diverted their travel, and it completely eliminated them moving on my property.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's you have to have a fence here because you have no food. My food plots this year came in great, and they destroyed every bit of them.
Damn.
I mean, it's tough.
I got to ask him, since it is Texas. Mick, what is the fence dynamic on private land in Texas? Like, is that a thing? Like, are guys like just throwing fences up? Would there even be a reason to do that? No.
South Texas and West Texas, but majority of the state, no. It's not what people think. It's funny because you kill a big buck in East Texas or somewhere, and they go, "Oh yeah, but that's Texas," and they
sure.
There's no perception on how hard that is, and but no, I mean, I would say I know of 3 high fences, maybe, within the surrounding counties that I live in. I mean, there's just not many, and those are literal high fence operations. They're not.
Yeah.
Hunting preserves.
Yeah. It's not like, a guy putting a fence up to protect his property.
No, none of that.
Yeah.
Nope.
It's interesting because that is, I'd say, fairly common in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama now. Like, you're seeing more and more of I've got 700 acres or I got 1,000 acres and I'm just going to fence it.
Yeah, but that's that guy that has 700 or 1,000 acres.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it costs some coin. Like right now, I'm looking at fencing, not for deer, but fencing to keep the hogs out of that property I just bought. And I think it's going to be like $30,000 to $40,000 to do it. I mean,
for how much?
To just put that's 67 acres.
Yeah. And that's not high fence, but it's like what, a 5 foot tall fence or something like that?
Right. It's like a 5 foot tall fence that, it's squares, welded wire.
Yeah, welded wire squares, like horse paneling.
Well, that's way cheaper than we were talking about. Way cheaper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's a smaller fence.
It's so double the cost, though. Double the height.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, like I said, they won't generally they won't push through it. They'll just go a different direction. They're so nomadic.
It's just an obstacle.
Yep. And I mean, it even open-ended, if you can just divert that, in Texas, you change your hunting opportunity by 10-fold by eliminating hogs. Because what's gonna happen is it's like where you go, man, I wouldn't lease a cattle property outside of the rut. You'll never see anything. They're pushing the bedding areas. Well, that's what it is. Like it's a constant intrusion to bedding areas and things like that, and it just ruins it.
Wow. Are there many outfitters in your part of Texas?
No.
Yeah.
No, there's, truth be told, outside of gun hunting, there's not a ton of hunting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds right.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, it's so unpredictable. It takes so much time to kill a really good deer here. You can't, look at it and go, oh, well, everything's lining up today. It should happen. Well, you go out there on that day and you see 0, and then for no rhyme or reason, it warms up to 80 degrees and boom, here they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a very inconsistent environment to what the norms are in the whitetail space.
Wild, man.
Well, so you said Iowa, you got a late season tag. Are you going to make it to the Midwest anymore before this year's over?
I'm too busy with the bow launch, and Easton just launched their arrows yesterday, and I'm packed with meetings on that, which is fine. So I'm going to eat my Kansas tag without even making a trip.
I was going to say, you never even made it up.
Whoa.
Not one single trip. Now I have to admit,
some of us could have used that tag, Mick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I spent some time on that buck. By the way, Spaniard, thank you very much.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Jared, the very first time I heard him say that he had named that buck, I'm like,
Spaniard.
that's the best name ever. And I said, I'll find a buck one day worthy of that. And
That's a good name. I'm sure it was more worthy than mine. Mine was like 125-inch 4-year-old.
Yeah, no, he was worthy of it. So anyway, I spent some time on him this year, and no matter what else happens, accomplished the goal that I kind of set out, making sure I killed him. And I was just icing on the cake, man. Obviously, I know those farms up there, and I'm going to go in and really just enjoy the experience, and no cameras, no nothing. And we'll see.
Yeah, man.
Are you going to be anywhere in the proximity that we were?
Yeah. Right. Yep. I'll probably be about 30 miles south of where Jeremy shot his deer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Good area.
We'll sync up on that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll tell you whatever we know. And also, there's lots of stealth cams littered out there. If you care to do some retrieval mission,
are they still in our account?
We don't want them back.
Are they still in our account?
No, I took them all off.
You cleaned them out?
Yeah, I cleaned them out.
Hey, that's it's funny you say that, because I have 5 hanging in Kansas right now, and I'm going, God, I'm doing the math. It's about 500 to go up there and back, and
it's not worth it.
I'll see you next year.
You know what? Here's our next. Somebody can take this idea and run with it. We should do some sort of like a trail cam
exchange program,
recovery exchange program. Like can be easily they're transacted on the open marketplace.
If you're hunting there, just let me know.
Swing
I already got them set up.
That.
They're ready to go. Change the batteries out. You'll be good to go.
That's exactly right.
All right, buddy. Well, dude, we appreciate your time this afternoon, and thanks for chatting with us. Long overdue, and congrats on the success this year. And obviously, we look forward to seeing how you rock it in Iowa here in the late season.
Yeah, and thanks for all you do for us, man.
Yeah, dude.
Hey, man. Hey, just you guys are killing it. We're proud to have you guys, and like I said, the sky's the limit right now, and like I said, we're looking forward to it. I'm excited for you guys to get your bows.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Better Backstrap.
Well, one thing that's undeniable, man, is you and I both like to eat. And so we're going to be partnering with the Better Backstrap this year to have the best seasonings possible for our meat this summer.
Yeah. Well, dude, when it comes to venison, it's like you've heard me talk about before. It's like, what does the preparation for all this look like and stuff? And it's like, I really want to make a point of eating more venison moving forward. And some of the Better Backstrap mixtures have made it super easy.
Yeah. And so we've got kind of 3 core mixtures. You've got your original Better Backstrap, which is for that grilling of your backstrap or tenderloins or anything like that. You've got your classic taco mix.
Can't go wrong with tacos.
Can't go wrong with that. And then you've got your standard SPG in the orange can.
Well, SPG and down the hatch.
There you go. So right now, if you go to betterbackstrap.com, you can use the code HUNTR15 to get 15% off any of your orders on the seasonings, and there'll probably be more coming out here throughout the year.
Get yourself a Better Backstrap.
And awesome. Mick Doggett.
I'll wear this hat for the last 5 minutes here.
Yeah, it's too good not to.
I like it.
Well, I mean, people are like, I don't know who Mick Doggett. Mick has been a huge supporter of our podcast for a long time. Really, when Jared and I started to take this thing serious, and become a close friend as well, and a guy that we've relied on for a lot of information and input on the industry and hunting different areas that we haven't been to, and so. Yeah, we've talked a lot about getting Mick on the podcast, and look forward to seeing him at ICAST at ATA show in January. So ICAST, it's the fishing show. Cool. Which, by the way, we will be at ATA show in January for some period of a day or so. We'll see.
What are the dates on that?
Oh, I don't know.
10th, 11th,
January, 9th, 10th, 11th, I think.
Yeah, okay.
It's like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Cool.
So we'll be there. It's in Indy?
I think so. Just business as usual. We're just going to go hang out for a bit?
Yep, go hang out for a bit. Maybe pop over to the Illinois farm from there. We'll see. Right?
Oh.
Right?
To hunt? Are we still? Yeah, we're still in the time frame. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, maybe just go over, pop a doe or something. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll have fun.
I don't know if we need to, man.
I don't know how many deer are on that damn property.
I don't think there's that many.
I'll be in when we finally can get some cameras on some of these like cut corn and beans. I think that'll show them here soon. But so anyways, we appreciate everyone listening to episode 226 with Mick Doggett. And if you're out hunting, good luck, and we'll see you next week.
Later.
Take me